I stood in the ashes of my grandmother's legacy, the acrid smoke still burning my lungs as I watched my mother smile. 20 years of sacrifice, every penny saved, every dream deferred to honor Grandma Rose's dying wish, had been reduced to blackened rubble in a single night. My brother Jake stood beside her, lighter fluid still visible on his shoes. They thought destroying the community center would force me to split the inheritance. They had no idea what Grandma's will really contained. 3 months earlier, I sat in Attorney Harold Whitman's mahogany-paneled office, my hands trembling as he read the last will and testament of Rose Marie Henderson, my beloved grandmother. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like tiny memories of the woman who had raised me when my own mother couldn't be bothered. To my granddaughter, Krista Marie Henderson, I leave the sum of $2,800,000. Harold's voice was steady, professional, but I caught the slight smile at the corner of his mouth. He had been Grandma Rose's attorney for 30 years and knew our family's complicated dynamics all too well. There is, however, a specific stipulation, he continued, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. This money is to be used for the establishment of the Rose Henderson Community Center for Underprivileged Youth. The facility must be built on the plot of land at 427 Maple Street, which I am also bequeathing to Krista. The center must be operational within 18 months of my passing. My heart swelled with emotion. Even in death, Grandma Rose was thinking of others. She had spent her entire life as a social worker, dedicating herself to helping children who had been dealt difficult hands by fate. This community center had been her dream for decades. Furthermore, Harold cleared his throat, I have appointed Krista as the sole executor of this bequest. No other family member shall have decision-making authority over these funds or this project. I left the office that day with a mixture of grief and determination. Grandma Rose had entrusted me with her life's dream, and I would not let her down. Within a week, I had hired architects and begun the planning process. The designs were beautiful, a 3-story building with classrooms, a library, a computer lab, and a recreational area. It would serve hundreds of children in our community. Word of the inheritance spread through my family like wildfire. I had expected some questions, maybe even some hurt feelings, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened at the family gathering I organized 3 weeks later. The dining room of my childhood home felt smaller than I remembered, perhaps because of the tension that hung in the air thicker than my aunt's perfume. My mother, Patricia Henderson, sat at the head of the table, a position she had claimed the moment Grandma Rose passed. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the oak surface in a rhythm that set my teeth on edge. So, Krista, she began, her voice syrupy sweet in the way that always preceded something unpleasant, we need to discuss this inheritance situation. My brother Jake slouched in his chair beside her, his bloodshot eyes darting between me and the door. At 34, he still lived in our mother's basement, jumping from one failed business venture to another. His latest scheme, a cryptocurrency trading platform, had cost him $40,000 he didn't have. There's nothing to discuss, I replied calmly, setting down my glass of water. Grandma Rose's wishes were very clear. The money is for the community center. Patricia's face hardened, the mask of maternal concern slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. That's nearly $3 million, Krista. Surely Mother didn't expect you to spend all of it on some project. It wasn't just some project to Grandma, I said, feeling my spine straighten. It was her life's dream. And yes, she did expect me to use all of it. The plans are already in motion. I've hired Miller and Associates as the architectural firm, and we've already spent $1.5 million on materials and initial construction costs. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake's face turned an alarming shade of purple, while Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You've already spent $1.5 million, Jake finally sputtered, without even consulting the family. I didn't need to consult anyone, I said firmly. Grandma made me the sole executor. This was her money, her dream, and her decision. Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is unacceptable. You're being selfish, Krista. That money belongs to the family. Jake needs help with his debts, and I have my own financial obligations. What obligations? I couldn't help but ask. The mortgage Grandma paid off for you 5 years ago, the car she bought you last Christmas. How dare you, Patricia hissed. I'm your mother. I deserve respect. Respect is earned, I said quietly, remembering all the times Grandma Rose had whispered those exact words to me when Patricia's neglect had cut particularly deep. Jake suddenly pulled out his phone, fiddling with it in a way that seemed oddly deliberate. You know, Krista, you've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, I replied, but something about his tone made me uneasy. Are you, though? Jake continued, his eyes never leaving his phone screen. I mean, spending $1.5 million without consulting anyone. Making these huge decisions so quickly after Grandma's death. Some might say that's unstable behavior. Patricia's eyes lit up with a calculating gleam that sent chills down my spine. Jake's right. You're obviously not in the right frame of mind to handle this kind of responsibility. I stood up, gathering my purse. This conversation is over. Grandma's wishes were clear, and I'm going to honor them. The community center will be built as planned. As I walked toward the door, Jake called out, We're not done with this, Krista. One way or another, we're going to get what's rightfully ours. I paused at the threshold, turning back to face them. The only thing Grandma thought you deserved was exactly what you got, nothing. And after today, I understand why. The drive home was a blur of emotions. My hands shook on the steering wheel as Jake's words echoed in my mind. Something about the way he had been holding his phone, the calculated nature of his questions, it all felt orchestrated. That night, I called my best friend Monica, who worked as my assistant on the community center project. I think I need to be careful, I told her, recounting the family meeting. Your mom and Jake have always been pieces of work, Monica said. But this sounds different. This sounds planned. As I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was coming. What I didn't know was that Jake had been recording our entire conversation, and he was already editing the footage, carefully removing context and splicing together clips that would paint a very different picture of my mental state. The war for Grandma Rose's legacy had begun, and my family was about to show me just how low they were willing to sink for money they believed they deserved. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of construction meetings, permit applications, and the endless paperwork that came with bringing Grandma Rose's dream to life. I threw myself into the work, finding solace in the tangible progress of the community center. The foundation had been poured, and watching the concrete set felt like making Grandma's vision literally solid and unshakable. That illusion of stability shattered on a Tuesday morning when I was served legal papers at the construction site. The process server, a tired-looking man in a rumpled suit, handed me the envelope with an apologetic grimace. Krista Henderson, he asked, though we both knew he already knew the answer. Yes, I said, my stomach dropping as I accepted the papers. You've been served. Have a nice day. Nice day. I almost laughed at the absurdity as I tore open the envelope. The legal jargon swam before my eyes, but certain phrases jumped out with crystal clarity. Petition for conservatorship. Mental incompetence. Patricia Henderson as petitioner. My mother was trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. I sank onto a stack of lumber, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Around me, construction workers continued their tasks, the sounds of hammers and saws, creating a cacophony that matched the chaos in my mind. Monica found me there 20 minutes later, still staring at the papers. Krista, what's wrong? She knelt beside me, gently taking the documents from my trembling hands. As she read, her face transformed from concern to fury. They can't be serious. On what grounds? Page 3, I whispered. Monica flipped to the page and read aloud, evidence of erratic behavior, impulsive financial decisions, and deteriorating mental state as documented in video recordings and witness testimonies. What video recordings? Monica asked. That's when it hit me. Jake and his phone at the family dinner. He hadn't been scrolling through social media. He had been recording me. Every word, every gesture, every moment of frustration or anger had been captured and was now being weaponized against me. We drove straight to the offices of Chen and Associates, where Sarah Chen, one of the city's best attorneys, agreed to see us immediately. Sarah was everything I wasn't in that moment, calm, collected, and radiating confidence in her sharp navy suit. "This is a clear attempt at financial exploitation," Sarah said after reviewing the documents. "But we need to take it seriously. They've included statements from a Dr. Morton, a psychiatrist who claims to have evaluated you." "I've never met any Dr. Morton," I said. "That's interesting," Sarah murmured, making notes. "They also have video recordings that allegedly show you exhibiting signs of mental instability. We'll need to see these recordings to prepare our defense." Over the next few days, Sarah worked her legal magic to obtain copies of the evidence against me. What we discovered made my blood run cold. Jake hadn't just recorded our family dinner, he had been secretly recording me for months. Every phone conversation, every time he'd visited the construction site, every interaction had been documented. But worse than the invasion of privacy was what he had done with the footage. The recordings had been edited with surgical precision. Conversations were taken out of context, reactions were spliced with different questions, and perfectly normal responses were made to look unhinged through clever manipulation. In one video, I was shown yelling, "I don't care what anyone thinks, I'll do whatever it takes." In reality, I had been talking about my determination to meet the construction deadline despite weather delays. But without that context, I looked aggressive and irrational. "This is sophisticated editing," Sarah observed. "Your brother didn't do this alone. Someone with technical expertise helped him," as if the legal assault wasn't enough. Strange things began happening at the construction site. Workers reported seeing people taking photographs from various angles, always disappearing when approached. Tools went missing, deliveries were mysteriously canceled, and small acts of sabotage began to add up. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was reviewing blueprints in my home office when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my cousin, Diane's name. Diane had always been the neutral party in our family, staying out of conflicts and maintaining relationships with everyone. "Krista, I need to see you," she said without preamble. "Can you meet me at the coffee shop on 8th Street in an hour and come alone?" Something in her voice made me agree immediately. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few college students buried in their laptops. Diane sat in the back corner, nervously shredding a napkin. "I'm taking a huge risk telling you this," she began before I even sat down. "But I can't stand by and watch this happen. You were always good to me, and Grandma Rose would haunt me forever if I didn't speak up." "What's going on, Diane?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Your mom has been planning this for months, even before Grandma died. She knew about the will. She broke into Harold Whitman's office one night and photographed documents." My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "What?" "There's more," Diane continued. "She's hired a psychiatrist, Dr. Morton, to declare you incompetent. But here's the thing, you're not supposed to know about it. They're planning an intervention for this Sunday at your mother's house. The whole family will be there, and Dr. Morton will perform an emergency evaluation. They want to ambush you." "How do you know all this?" Diane's face flushed with shame. "Because they asked me to help get you there, told me to invite you for a family brunch to mend fences. I agreed. At first, your mom can be very persuasive. But then I heard her on the phone with Dr. Morton discussing how much she was paying him to guarantee the results she wanted. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. My own mother was orchestrating an elaborate scheme to steal my grandmother's money, and she was willing to have me declared insane to do it. "There's something else," Diane said, pulling out her phone. "I recorded that phone conversation. I know it was wrong, but something felt off about the whole thing." She slid the phone across the table. "Take it. Use it to protect yourself." As I listened to the recording, my mother's voice filled my ears, cold and calculating as she discussed payment terms with Dr. Morton. "I don't care what it takes," she said. "My daughter is clearly not mentally fit to handle that kind of money. You just need to make it official. The family is counting on you, doctor." Dr. Morton's oily response made my skin crawl. For the agreed upon fee, Mrs. Henderson, I can guarantee the evaluation will support your petition. Just get her to the house on Sunday and leave the rest to me. I looked up at Diane, who was crying silently. I'm so sorry, Krista. I know she's my aunt, but this is wrong. Grandma Rose would be horrified. Thank you, I whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. You don't know what this means to me. Be careful, Diane warned. Your mother is desperate, and desperate people do terrible things. She keeps saying that one way or another she'll get that money. As I drove home, my mind raced with the implications of what I had learned. My family wasn't just greedy, they were dangerous. The construction site incidents suddenly made more sense. This wasn't just about legal maneuvering anymore. This was about intimidation and control. That night, I called Sarah Chen and told her everything. We need to be prepared for Sunday, she said. If you don't show up, they'll use it as evidence that you're avoiding evaluation because you know you're unstable. But if you do go, I'll be walking into a trap, I finished. Not necessarily, Sarah said thoughtfully. Not if we trap them first. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about Grandma Rose. She had always told me that family should be a source of strength, not strife. But she had also taught me to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. I won't let them win, Grandma, I whispered into the darkness. Your dream will become reality no matter what it takes. Outside my window, a car engine started. I peered through the curtains to see a familiar vehicle pulling away from the curb, the same sedan I had noticed at the construction site. My family wasn't just planning for Sunday, they were watching me right now. The real battle was about to begin. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that should have promised new beginnings. Instead, I dressed carefully in my most conservative outfit, a navy blazer and cream-colored slacks that Grandma Rose had always said made me look like a young woman with her head on straight. If I was walking into an ambush, I would look every inch the stable, competent person I knew myself to be. Sarah Chen met me at my house at 9 in the morning, her expression grave but determined. Remember, she said, checking that my phone was properly positioned in my jacket pocket, we need clear audio of everything that happens. Don't let them take your phone, no matter what they say. What if they search me? I asked, my nerves making my voice higher than usual. Sarah smiled grimly and handed me a small device. Backup recorder clips inside your waistband. They'd have to strip search you to find it, and I doubt they'll go that far. If they do, we have bigger legal problems than conservatorship. Monica insisted on driving me, waiting in her car a block away in case I needed a quick escape. I still think this is insane, she muttered for the 10th time, walking right into their trap. Sometimes the best way to escape a trap is to spring it on your own terms, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. My mother's house looked deceptively peaceful from the outside. The 2-story colonial where I'd spent my childhood had been maintained with Grandma Rose's money, every shutter perfectly painted, every shrub meticulously trimmed. It was a facade as carefully constructed as my mother's public persona. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell even though I still had a key. This wasn't my home anymore, it was enemy territory. Jake opened the door, his smile so fake it could have been painted on. Krista, so glad you could make it. Diane said you were excited about a family brunch. Thrilled, I replied, matching his false enthusiasm. The house was fuller than I'd expected. Besides my mother and Jake, I saw several aunts and uncles, a few cousins and faces I didn't recognize. They all turned to stare as I entered, their expressions ranging from pity to barely concealed greed. Krista, darling. My mother glided forward, air kissing my cheeks. So wonderful to have the family together. Come sit, we have so much to discuss. The living room had been rearranged. Instead of the usual casual seating, chairs were positioned in a semicircle facing a single armchair clearly meant for me. It looked less like a family gathering and more like a tribunal. Actually, I said, remaining standing, I was promised brunch. I haven't eaten yet. My mother's smile tightened. Of course, dear, but first there's someone I'd like you to meet. Dr. Morton, this is my daughter, Krista. A man emerged from this study, mid-50s gray-haired, with the kind of practiced warmth that never reached his eyes. He extended a hand, which I politely shook while memorizing every detail of his appearance for future legal proceedings. Ms. Henderson, what a pleasure. Your mother has told me so much about you. All good things, I'm sure, I said dryly. Why don't we all sit down, Dr. Morton suggested, gesturing toward the semicircle of chairs. I allowed myself to be guided to the hot seat, noting how family members positioned themselves to block potential exits. My phone recorded everything from my pocket, while the backup device captured audio from a different angle. Krista, my mother began, her voice dripping with false concern. We're all here because we love you and we're worried about you. Worried about what exactly? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Jake leaned forward. Your behavior lately has been troubling. The way you've been handling Grandma's money, making these huge decisions without consulting anyone. Spending $1.5 million in just a few weeks, Aunt Martha chimed in, shaking her head. That's not normal, dear. I almost laughed. Aunt Martha, who had borrowed $30,000 from Grandma for a emergency that turned out to be a cosmetic surgery vacation in Brazil. I'm following Grandma Rose's explicit instructions, I said calmly. Building the community center she always dreamed of. How is that troubling? Dr. Morton cleared his throat. Sometimes, Ms. Henderson, when we experience loss, we can make impulsive decisions that seem logical to us but appear irrational to others. I understand you've been quite aggressive with family members who've expressed concern. I've been firm about following my grandmother's wishes, I corrected. There's a difference between aggression and boundaries. But you have to admit, Patricia interjected, your behavior has been erratic. The secrecy, the rush to spend money, the way you've cut family out of decisions that affect all of us. Decisions about Grandma's money don't affect you, I said firmly. She left it to me specifically for the community center. Not for the family, not to be split up, but for one specific purpose. See? Jake pointed at me like I was Exhibit A. This hostility, this paranoia that we're all out to get her. Dr. Morton, isn't this exactly what you were describing earlier? I noticed Dr. Morton had a clipboard in his lap already filled with notes, despite having just met me. Ms. Henderson, would you be willing to answer a few questions just to help us understand your current state of mind? That depends on the questions, I replied. He smiled that false smile again. Nothing invasive. For instance, have you been sleeping well? As well as anyone managing a major construction project, I answered honestly. Any changes in appetite? I skip lunch sometimes when I'm busy. Pretty normal for a working professional. Have you experienced any paranoid thoughts? Feeling like people are watching you or conspiring against you? I almost laughed at the irony. Well, considering I'm sitting in an ambush intervention with a psychiatrist I've never met before who seems to have pre-written notes about my mental state, I'd say any paranoid thoughts are pretty justified. The room bristled with attention. My mother's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating coldness underneath. Krista, she said sharply, Dr. Morton is here to help. The least you can do is cooperate. Help with what? I asked. I'm not sick. I'm not struggling. I'm executing my grandmother's will exactly as she intended. Dr. Morton set down his clipboard with theatrical concern. Ms. Henderson, your family has shared some very troubling information with me. Video recordings that show severe mood swings, aggressive behavior, delusional thinking. Edited videos taken out of context, I interrupted. Are you suggesting your family would deliberately deceive me? His tone implied this was further evidence of paranoia. I'm stating a fact. Jake has been secretly recording me for months and editing the footage to support this false narrative. I have evidence. More paranoia, Jake muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Dr. Morton reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. Ms. Henderson, given what I've observed today and the concerning information your family has provided, I believe you would benefit from a comprehensive evaluation. This is a voluntary admission form for a 72-hour observation period at Riverside Behavioral Health. My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to get conservatorship, they were trying to have me committed. That's not happening, I said, standing up. Krista, please. My mother stood as well, moving to block my path. We only want what's best for you. Just sign the form, spend a few days getting the help you need, and then we can discuss the money. I mean your health when you're better. There it is, I said loud enough for my recording devices to clearly capture. This isn't about my health. It's about the money. It's always been about the money. Your paranoid fixation on money is exactly why you need help, Dr. Morton said smoothly. Your family is concerned about your well-being, not finances. Really? I pulled out my phone pretending to check a message. Then why did my mother tell you, and I quote, I don't care what it takes. My daughter is clearly not mentally fit to handle that kind of money. You just need to make it official. The family is counting on you, doctor. The room went silent. Dr. Morton's face paled. How did you? My mother started, then caught herself. Or how about this one? I continued scrolling through my phone. Dr. Morton responding, for the agreed-upon fee, Mrs. Henderson, I can guarantee the evaluation will support your petition. You recorded me? Patricia's voice rose to a shriek. You little... Actually, I didn't, I said calmly, but someone with a conscience did. Someone who knew what you were planning was wrong. Diane, who had been silent in the corner, stood up. It was me, Aunt Patricia. I recorded you because what you're doing is evil. Grandma Rose would be ashamed. The room erupted. Family members shouted accusations. Dr. Morton frantically grabbed his briefcase, and my mother lunged toward me. You ungrateful brat! That money belongs to the family. Jake tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back, holding it high. I'd be very careful about assault, I said loudly. Everything that's happened here today has been recorded. Every lie, every attempt to coerce me into signing false documents, every admission that this is about money, not my mental health. It doesn't matter, Patricia snarled, her carefully constructed image completely shattered. We have the videos, we have Dr. Morton's evaluation. No judge will side with someone who secretly records their own family. We'll see about that, I said, heading for the door. Oh, and Dr. Morton, I'd start looking for a good lawyer. Filing false psychiatric evaluations is a serious crime. I believe it's called conspiracy to commit fraud. The psychiatrist fled the house so fast, he left his clipboard behind. I picked it up, noting the pre-written evaluation declaring me mentally incompetent dated 3 days ago. This isn't over, Jake shouted as I reached the door. One way or another, we're getting what we deserve. Yes, I said, pausing at the threshold. I believe you will. I walked out of my childhood home for what I knew would be the last time my head held high, despite the shouting behind me. Monica was already pulling up to the curb, having heard the commotion from a block away. How did it go? She asked as I collapsed into the passenger seat. Exactly as planned, I said, holding up my phone. Every word recorded, every crime documented. Sarah is going to have a field day with this. As we drove away, I saw my family spilling out of the house, still arguing among themselves. The intervention had failed, but something in Jake's expression as he watched us leave sent chills down my spine. He looked less like a defeated man and more like someone planning their next move. You know they won't stop, Monica said quietly. I know, I replied, watching my childhood home disappear in the side mirror. But neither will I. The battle lines were drawn, and I had won this skirmish. But as I would soon learn, my family had darker plans in motion. Plans that would test not just my resolve, but my faith in justice itself. Monday morning arrived with the kind of dramatic thunderstorm that felt like nature's commentary on my life. I sat in Sarah Chen's conference room, rain lashing against the windows as we reviewed the recordings from the intervention. My attorney's expression grew more incredulous with each passing minute. This is gold, Sarah said, pausing the playback. They literally committed conspiracy to defraud on tape. Dr. Morton accepting bribes, your mother admitting it's about money, the pre-dated evaluation. We have enough to file criminal charges. Will that stop the conservatorship hearing? I asked, clutching my coffee cup like a lifeline. Sarah's expression sobered. Unfortunately, no. The hearing is already scheduled for Thursday, but this evidence will devastate their case. Over the next 3 days, Sarah worked tirelessly to prepare our defense. She subpoenaed the original footage Jake had taken, hired a video expert to prove the editing manipulation, and filed formal complaints against Dr. Morton with the state medical board. Thursday morning, I dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal suit that Grandma Rose had bought me for my college graduation. For when you need to show them who's boss, she'd said with a wink. I touched the small rose pendant she'd given me, drawing strength from her memory. The courthouse was a monument to justice, all marble columns and scales of justice. But as I climbed the steps, I wondered how much justice could really be found within its walls. My family had already gathered clustered around Patricia, like soldiers around their general. "Krista," my mother called out, her voice carrying across the plaza. "It's not too late to do the right thing. Think about the family." I didn't respond, following Sarah through the security checkpoint and into courtroom 7. Judge Eleanor Whitfield presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for seeing through lies. The conservatorship hearing began with my mother's lawyer, a slick man named Gregory Ashe, who looked like he'd stepped out of a legal drama. He presented Jake's videos with dramatic flair, painting me as an unstable woman making reckless financial decisions. "Your Honor," Ashe intoned, "Ms. Henderson has spent $1.5 million in mere weeks. She's cut off her family, exhibited paranoid behavior, and shown clear signs of mental deterioration following her grandmother's death." The edited videos played on a large screen. Out of context, I had to admit they looked damning. My frustration at the construction site became violent outbursts. My firm responses to my family's demands became delusional episodes. Jake had been thorough in his deception. But then it was Sarah's turn. "Your Honor," she began, "I'd like to present the unedited versions of these recordings along with evidence of deliberate manipulation." Our video expert, Dr. Marcus Webb, took the stand. With clinical precision, he demonstrated how the footage had been altered, showing timestamps that didn't match audio that had been spliced and reactions paired with different conversations entirely. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Webb concluded, "these videos have been deliberately edited to misrepresent Ms. Henderson's behavior and mental state." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Judge Whitfield's expression grew stern as she reviewed the evidence. But Ashe wasn't finished. "Even if the videos were edited," he argued, "multiple family members have witnessed Ms. Henderson's erratic behavior. We have sworn affidavits from family members who stand to gain financially if my client loses control of her inheritance." Sarah interrupted. "Your Honor, I'd like to play audio from this past Sunday's attempted intervention." As my recording played through the courtroom speakers, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Dr. Morton's voice accepting bribes, my mother's admission about wanting money. The predated evaluation, it all painted a picture of deliberate fraud. Patricia's face cycled through emotions, shock, rage, and finally, a cold calculation that made my blood run cold. She whispered urgently to Jake, who typed something on his phone. Judge Whitfield called a recess, during which Sarah pulled me aside. "We're doing well, but something's bothering me. Your mother looks too calm for someone whose scheme is falling apart." When court reconvened, Ashe stood with renewed confidence. "Your Honor, we'd like to call a surprise witness, Margaret Sullivan, a close family friend who has known Ms. Henderson for 20 years. My stomach dropped as Margaret walked in. She was my mother's best friend from college, someone I'd called Aunt Maggie as a child. But as she took the stand, her expression was cold, almost rehearsed. "Ms. Sullivan," Ashe began, "can you tell us about your observations of Ms. Henderson's recent behavior?" Margaret launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar. She claimed to have witnessed me talking to myself at the grocery store, seen me crying hysterically in my car, and observed me making disturbing comments about my family trying to poison her. "That's a complete lie," I whispered to Sarah. "I know," she whispered back, "but we need to prove it." Sarah's cross-examination was brutal. "Ms. Sullivan, these alleged incidents, did you report them to anyone? Take photos, have any other witnesses?" Margaret faltered slightly. "Well, no, I didn't want to embarrass Krista." "How considerate," Sarah said dryly. "And tell me, what is your relationship with Mrs. Patricia Henderson?" "We're friends," Margaret replied, but her eyes darted nervously. "Just friends. You haven't received any financial benefits from Mrs. Henderson." Objection, Ash called out. Relevance. Goes to witness credibility, Your Honor, Sarah responded. I'll allow it, Judge Whitfield ruled. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Patricia has helped me out occasionally, loans between friends. Sarah produced documents with theatrical timing. Would these loans include the $10,000 payment made to your account 3 days ago, the day after the failed intervention? The courtroom erupted. Margaret's face went white, and she looked desperately at Patricia, who stared straight ahead as if Margaret didn't exist. Or perhaps, Sarah continued, the text message you sent to Mrs. Henderson saying, quote, "Don't worry, I'll say whatever you need about Krista. You've always been so generous to me." I gasped. Sarah hadn't told me she'd obtained Margaret's phone records. My attorney was full of surprises. "Where did you get that?" Margaret sputtered. "From your phone company with a proper subpoena," Sarah replied smoothly. "Did you think deleted messages disappear forever?" Judge Whitfield's gavel cracked like thunder. "Ms. Sullivan, did you accept payment to provide false testimony in my courtroom?" Margaret broke down crying, but her tears found no sympathy from the judge. "I needed the money. My mortgage was behind, and Patricia said she'd help if I just told a little white lie." "Perjury is not a little white lie," Judge Whitfield said coldly. "Bailiff, please take Ms. Sullivan into custody. She'll be charged with perjury and conspiracy." As Margaret was led away in handcuffs, I caught a glimpse of Jake's face. Instead of looking defeated, he had a slight smirk that sent chills down my spine. He typed something else on his phone, then showed it to Patricia, who nodded grimly. The rest of the hearing proceeded quickly. Without their star witness and with the evidence of fraud piling up, Ash had little ammunition left. Judge Whitfield's ruling was swift and decisive. "I find no evidence that Ms. Henderson is mentally incompetent," the judge declared. "What I do find is a disturbing pattern of manipulation, fraud, and attempted theft by her family members. The petition for conservatorship is denied." But Judge Whitfield wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation. Dr. Morton, Mrs. Patricia Henderson, and Mr. Jake Henderson may face charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery, and filing false documents." As we left the courtroom, I should have felt victorious. We had won. The law had prevailed. But the look in Jake's eyes haunted me like he knew something I didn't. "You did it," Monica said, hugging me on the courthouse steps. "You beat them." Did I wondered aloud, watching my family climb into their cars, with none of the defeat I'd expected to see. Sarah seemed to share my unease. "Be careful, Krista. Desperate people do desperate things, and your family just became very desperate." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Jake's smirk, his constant phone typing, the way my mother had nodded at whatever he'd shown her. They had lost in court, but they didn't act like people who had lost. At 3 a.m, my phone rang. It was Tom Martinez, the night supervisor at the construction site. "Ms. Henderson," his voice was tight with worry. "You need to come down here right away. Someone's been here. They've vandalized the equipment and spray-painted threats all over the walls." I threw on clothes and raced to the site, my heart pounding. Under the harsh glare of the security lights, the damage was clear. Every piece of machinery had been sabotaged, windows were broken, and across the main wall in blood-red paint, someone had written, "Share or suffer." "Did the cameras catch anything?" I asked Tom. His expression was grim. "That's the thing. The cameras were disabled first. Whoever did this knew exactly where they were and how to avoid them until they could shut them down." As police sirens wailed in the distance, I stared at the threatening message. My family had lost the legal battle, but they were far from defeated. If anything, they were escalating. The war for Grandma Rose's legacy was entering a darker phase, and I was beginning to understand that my mother and brother would stop at nothing. Absolutely nothing to get what they believed they deserved. The vandalism at the construction site was just the beginning. Over the next week, my life became a waking nightmare of escalating threats and psychological warfare. The police took reports, dusted for fingerprints, and promised to increase patrols, but we all knew the truth. Without concrete evidence linking the vandalism to my family, their hands were tied. I threw myself into damage control, working with insurance adjusters and replacement equipment vendors. The construction crew rallied around the project, many of them volunteering extra hours to make up for lost time. Their dedication to Grandma Rose's vision touched my heart and strengthened my resolve. But the threats didn't stop at property damage. It started with phone calls at all hours. My cell would ring at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, always from different numbers, always hanging up when I answered. When I stopped picking up, the voicemails began. Heavy breathing, whispered threats, sometimes just the sound of fire crackling. That last one made my blood run cold. Then came the letters. The first arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my front door, despite my apartment building's security system. Block letters cut from magazines spelled out, "You can't build dreams on stolen money." "Stolen money," Monica said incredulously when I showed her. "Your grandmother left it to you specifically. They've convinced themselves it belongs to them," I replied, carefully placing the letter in a plastic bag for the police. In their minds, I'm the thief. The second letter was more direct. Accidents happen at construction sites. The third made me consider hiring bodyguards. "You look peaceful when you sleep." That one sent me to a security company the same day. By Wednesday, I had cameras installed in every room of my apartment, motion sensors on all windows, and a state-of-the-art alarm system. The security consultant, a former police detective named Marcus Williams, took one look at the letters and insisted on additional measures. "These aren't random threats," he said, his expression grave. "Someone's been watching you, studying your routines. See this comment about your sleep. They've been close enough to observe you through windows." The thought made my skin crawl. Marcus helped me install blackout curtains and reinforced locks, but I still found myself jumping at every sound. Sarah Chen was furious when I updated her. "This is witness intimidation. We need to get restraining orders immediately." "Based on what evidence?" I asked, exhausted from another sleepless night. "We can't prove it's them." "Yet," Sarah said firmly, "but they'll slip up. They always do." The security cameras at my apartment proved their worth sooner than expected. On Friday night, motion sensors triggered an alert on my phone. I was at Monica's house having dinner and trying to pretend my life was normal for a few hours. We both crowded around my phone to watch the live feed. A figure in dark clothing approached my apartment door, hood pulled low to hide their face. They slipped something under the door, then paused, looking directly at the camera. For just a moment, the hood shifted. "Is that?" Monica gasped. I enlarged the image, my heart racing. The face was partially obscured, but I caught a glimpse of a distinctive watch, a gold Rolex with a custom band. The same watch Jake had shown off at Christmas, bought with money he'd borrowed from Grandma Rose. "Got you," I whispered. But when I returned home with a police escort, the evidence was frustrating. The letter was there. Family takes care of family one way or another. But the camera footage was corrupted. The file showed clear images right up until the moment the figure looked at the camera, then nothing but static. "Your brother must have used some kind of jamming device," Officer Reynolds suggested. "We see this sometimes with tech-savvy criminals." Tech-savvy. Jake, who could barely restart his laptop without help. Someone was helping him, someone with serious technical skills. The construction site became a fortress. I hired round-the-clock security, installed floodlights that turned night into day, and implemented a check-in system for every worker and visitor. The costs were eating into the budget, but I couldn't risk another attack. Despite the precautions, things kept happening. Tools would go missing and reappear in dangerous positions. Materials would be mysteriously contaminated. One morning, we found every single blueprint soaked in what looked like blood, but turned out to be red paint mixed with corn syrup. "They're trying to bleed you dry," Sarah observed during one of our strategy meetings. "Death by 1,000 cuts, security costs, replacement materials, delays. If they can't take the money legally, they'll make sure you spend it all on defending yourself." She was right. The community center's budget was hemorrhaging money on security measures and replacing sabotaged materials. At this rate, we'd run out of funds before the building was complete. Then Marcus Williams made a discovery that changed everything. I've been reviewing footage from all the cameras, he said, spreading printouts across my dining table. Look at this. Every incident at the construction site happens between 2 and 4 in the morning. But here's the interesting part. He pointed to traffic camera footage he'd somehow obtained. Your mother's car passes by the construction site 15 minutes before each incident, every single time. That's not enough for an arrest, I said, though my pulse quickened. No, but it's a pattern, and look at this. He pulled up footage from a gas station near the construction site. This sedan appears at the same gas station right before each incident. The driver always pays cash, always wears a hood, but look at the passenger seat. I squinted at the grainy image. In the passenger seat, barely visible, was a bright pink phone case. The same obnoxiously bright case Patricia had been sporting lately. They're getting sloppy, Marcus said with satisfaction. Criminals always do when they think they're untouchable. But the worst was yet to come. Saturday evening, I was reviewing security footage in my home office when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read, "Beautiful building. Shame what happens to wood and gasoline." Attached was a photo of the community center taken that day. In the foreground, barely visible, was a red gas can. I immediately called Tom at the construction site. "Lock everything down, now. Check every inch of the building for accelerants." While racing to the site, I called Sarah, Marcus, and the police. By the time I arrived, the bomb squad was already there. They found 3 gas cans hidden in strategic places that would have caused maximum damage if ignited. Whoever placed these knew exactly where the support beams were, the fire investigator said. This wasn't random vandalism. This was attempted arson by someone with inside knowledge of the building's structure. Inside knowledge. Only a handful of people had access to the detailed blueprints, the construction crew, the architects, and anyone they might have shared them with. My mind raced through possibilities. That night, I couldn't go home. The threat felt too real, too immediate. Monica insisted I stay with her, and I didn't argue. As I lay on her guest bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed with another message. This time it was from Jake's number. "Just wanted to check if you're okay, sis. Heard there was some trouble at your site." So dangerous construction work. Maybe it's a sign you should reconsider. The casual cruelty of it, the mock concern hiding a clear threat, made me want to scream. Instead, I screenshot the message and added it to my growing file of evidence. "And they're going to burn it down," I told Monica, who had appeared in the doorway with hot chocolate. "All of Grandma's dreams, all that work, they're going to destroy it all if I don't give them what they want." "Then we stop them," Monica said firmly. "We catch them in the act." "How? They're too careful, too smart." "No," Monica interrupted. "They're getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and when they do, we'll be ready." As if in response to her words, my phone rang. Unknown number. This time I was ready. I nodded to Monica, who started recording with her phone, and answered. "Hello, Krista." The voice was disguised, run through some kind of modifier, but I could hear the anger underneath. "Last warning. Tomorrow you announce you're splitting the inheritance with your family, or Tuesday morning there won't be anything left to split." "Who is this?" I demanded, though I had my suspicions. "Family," the voice said. "Family that should have been taken care of. You have 24 hours. The line went dead. I looked at Monica, whose face had gone pale. We both knew what this meant. They were done with subtle threats and minor sabotage. They were going for the killing blow. "We need to call the FBI, Monica said. "This is beyond local police now." She was right. The threats had escalated to domestic terrorism. As I dialed Sarah Chen's emergency number, I made a decision. I wouldn't run, I wouldn't hide, and I certainly wouldn't give in to their demands. If my family wanted a war, they were about to learn that Grandma Rose hadn't just left me money. She'd left me her iron will and determination to see justice done. The battle for the community center was about to reach its explosive climax, and I was going to make sure that when the smoke cleared, the only thing destroyed would be my family's delusions of entitlement. Monday night felt different from the moment the sun set. There was a charge in the air like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I'd spent the day coordinating with law enforcement. FBI agents had interviewed me extensively. Security had been tripled at the construction site and unmarked police cars patrolled the neighborhood. "We're taking the threats seriously," Agent Sarah Delgado assured me. "We have units positioned around the construction site and your apartment. If anyone tries anything tonight, we'll catch them." Despite the reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Monica stayed with me, both of us too anxious to eat the takeout we'd ordered. We sat in my living room surrounded by security monitors, showing feeds from the construction site, watching and waiting. "Maybe they were bluffing," Monica said around 11, though she didn't sound convinced. "With all the security, they'd be insane to try anything." "Since when has my family been sane about this?" I replied, my eyes glued to the monitors. The hours crawled by. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock. I was starting to think Monica might be right when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Tom Martinez, the night supervisor, but it wasn't Tom's voice that greeted me. "You should have listened," the disguised voice from before said. "You had your chance." "Where's Tom?" I demanded, fear shooting through me like ice water. "What have you done?" "He's taking a little nap. Don't worry, he'll wake up with a headache and an interesting story for the police, if there are any police left to tell." "What do you mean?" "Check your monitors, dear sister." The line went dead. I whirled toward the security screens, my heart hammering. At first, everything looked normal, the construction site bathed in floodlights, security guards at their posts. Then I noticed it. The guards weren't moving. They were slumped at their stations, unconscious or worse. "Oh my God," Monica breathed. "Krista, we need to call." "Already on it," I said, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. But even as I reported the emergency, I saw movement on the monitors. 3 figures in dark clothing emerged from the shadows, moving with purpose toward the building. One carried what looked like gas cans, another had a bag of supplies, and the third turned toward one of the cameras, and for a moment the hood slipped. Jake's face was clearly visible, his expression a mixture of rage and determination. "They're inside the building," I told the 911 operator. "My brother, Jake Henderson, and 2 others. They're going to burn it down." "Units are responding," the operator assured me. "Stay where you are. Do not go to the scene." But I was already grabbing my keys. "I have to go," I told Monica. "Are you insane?" She tried to block my path. "That's exactly what they want." "I can't let them destroy Grandma's dream," I said. "I have to document this. The security cameras might not be enough. I need to witness it myself." Monica grabbed her keys. "Then I'm coming with you." We raced through empty streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. In the distance, sirens wailed, but would they get there in time? The construction site was 15 minutes away on a good day. At night, driving like a maniac, I made it in 8. We screeched to a halt a block away, not wanting to alert them to our presence. The construction site looked eerily quiet from the outside, the floodlights creating pools of harsh light and deep shadows. But I could smell it already. Gasoline fumes carried on the night wind. "Stay in the car," I told Monica. "Keep the engine running." "Like hell," she replied, already out of the vehicle. We crept closer, using parked cars as cover. Through the chain-link fence, I could see the security guards more clearly. They were breathing drugged, not dead, small mercies. But the main gate stood open, the lock cut with bolt cutters that lay discarded on the ground. Inside the building, lights flickered. Flashlight beams danced across windows as the intruders moved through the structure. My beautiful community center, so close to completion, was about to become a funeral pyre for my family's greed. I pulled out my phone and started recording, making sure to capture everything: the cut lock, the unconscious guards, the open gate. Evidence. Undeniable evidence. A figure emerged from the building and my blood ran cold. Patricia walked calmly toward a van I hadn't noticed before parked in the shadows. She was carrying something: papers, no blueprints. The original blueprints Grandma Rose had commissioned years ago. "She's stealing the blueprints," Monica whispered. "Why?" "To claim the idea was hers all along," I realized with a sick feeling. "Burn down my building, use the insurance money, and remaining funds to build Patricia's community center somewhere else." My mother had thought of everything, almost. More sirens closer now. Patricia's head snapped up her face, a mask of fury. She barked something at the building and Jake appeared in the doorway. Pour it all, Patricia commanded. Every drop, we're out of time. Through the windows, I could see liquid splashing, darkening the new floors. The smell of gasoline grew overwhelming. They were going to do it. They were really going to burn down Grandma's dream out of pure spite and greed. Stop, I couldn't help myself. I stood up, still recording. Patricia, Jake, please don't do this. They froze. Jake's face went white, but Patricia's expression turned murderous. You stupid girl, she snarled. You couldn't just share, could you? Couldn't just be a good daughter and take care of your family. Grandma took care of her family, I shot back. She left you the house, paid your debts, funded Jake's schemes. But it was never enough, was it? Shut up. Jake emerged, fully a lighter in his hand. You don't know what it's like always being compared to perfect Krista, Grandma's favorite, the golden grandchild who could do no wrong. So you'll burn down a community center meant to help children. I kept recording, kept them talking. The sirens were so close now. Children who need what we needed, a safe place, support, a chance. Very touching, Patricia said coldly. She nodded to Jake. Do it. Now. Jake, please, I begged. This isn't you. You're not a monster. You're my brother. For a moment, he hesitated. I saw conflict in his eyes, a flash of the boy who used to build pillow forts with me. Then Patricia's voice cracked like a whip. Do it, or I'll tell everyone about Vegas, about what really happened to that money. Jake's face hardened. He flicked the lighter flame dancing in the darkness. No, I screamed. Everything happened at once. Police cars roared into view, lights blazing. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. A voice boomed through a megaphone. Drop the lighter. Step away from the building. Jake panicked. The lighter tumbled from his fingers. Time slowed to a crawl. I watched the lighter fall, its flame like a tiny falling star. It hit the gasoline-soaked ground and the world exploded into orange and heat. The fire raced through the building with terrifying speed. Windows shattered from the heat flames, licking up the walls like hungry tongues. My community center, my grandmother's dream, became an inferno in seconds. Get back! Police officers grabbed us, pulling us away from the fence as the heat became unbearable. Through the smoke and chaos, I saw them arresting Patricia and Jake. My mother fought like a wild animal, screaming about injustice and stolen birthrights. Jake just looked broken, staring at the flames he'd created with hollow eyes. The third figure emerged from behind the building, trying to flee. Officers tackled them, and when they pulled off the hood, I gasped. Margaret Sullivan, the woman who'd committed perjury at the conservatorship hearing. She'd been in on it from the beginning. Fire trucks arrived, firefighters rushing to contain the blaze. But I knew it was too late. The building was fully engulfed, the wooden frame crackling and collapsing inward. Months of work, millions of dollars, countless dreams, all reduced to smoke and ash because of jealousy and greed. I sank to my knees on the asphalt, Monica's arms around me as I watched it burn. Everything we'd worked for, everything Grandma Rose had envisioned, gone. The tears came then, hot and bitter. But through the smoke, I saw something that stopped my tears. The fire chief was talking animatedly with another firefighter, pointing at the building and shaking his head. Agent Delgado appeared at my side. Ms. Henderson, she said gently, I know this is devastating, but we need to talk. The fire chief has some interesting observations about the burn pattern. This might be more than simple arson. I looked up at her, not understanding. What do you mean? The accelerant pattern is very specific, very deliberate. Whoever planned this knew exactly what they were doing, maybe too well. We're going to need to investigate everyone who had access to those blueprints. As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, I stood among the ashes of my grandmother's dream. But in the harsh light of day, I could see something else, the seeds of justice finally taking root. My family had revealed their true nature for all to see, and their crime had been captured from every angle. They'd burned down the building, but they hadn't destroyed the dream, and they certainly hadn't broken me. The war wasn't over. If anything, it had just truly begun. The acrid smell of smoke still clung to my clothes 3 days after the fire. I sat in the offices of Preston Insurance, watching Bradley Adams, the senior investigator assigned to our case, review footage from that horrific night. His expression grew more intrigued with each passing minute. "Ms. Henderson," he said, pausing the video at the moment Jake dropped the lighter. "I've been investigating arson for 20 years. This is one of the most documented cases I've ever seen." "Is that good?" I asked, exhausted from sleepless nights and endless police interviews. Bradley leaned back in his chair, studying me. "That depends. Your policy covers arson even by family members, but there are irregularities here that concern me." My stomach dropped. "What kind of irregularities?" He pulled up documents on his computer. "2 days before the fire, someone attempted to modify your insurance policy. They tried to remove you as the primary beneficiary and add Patricia Henderson instead." "What?" I shot forward in my chair. "That's impossible. I never authorized any changes." "I know," Bradley said with a slight smile. "The change was rejected because it lacked proper authentication. But the attempt was made using login credentials that traced back to your brother's IP address. Another piece of evidence of premeditation." Sarah Chen, who had insisted on accompanying me, made rapid notes. "They planned every detail," she murmured, "or thought they did." Bradley pulled up more documents. "There's more. The person who tried to change the policy also inquired about expedited claims processing. They wanted to know how quickly insurance funds could be released after a total loss." "They were already planning to collect the insurance money," I said, disgust rising in my throat. "It appears so, but here's where it gets really interesting." Bradley turned his monitor so we could see. "I've been analyzing the fire patterns with our forensic team. The accelerant was spread in a very specific pattern, one that would ensure maximum damage while appearing accidental to a casual observer." "But Jake dropped the lighter accidentally when the police arrived," I protested. Bradley shook his head. "Did he look at this angle from the security footage?" He showed us enhanced footage from a camera I didn't even know existed, one from a building across the street. In it, Jake's panicked dropping of the lighter looked far more deliberate. His hand moved in a practiced motion, and he stepped back immediately, as if expecting the burst of flames. "They practiced this," Sarah breathed. "This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. This was rehearsed." "That's my assessment," Bradley agreed. "But there's one more thing that troubles me. The blueprints your mother was carrying. Why take those if the plan was simply to burn everything?" I thought about it, pieces clicking into place. She was going to rebuild, use the insurance money, and claim the community center was her idea all along. Paint me as the unstable daughter who burned down her mother's dream project. Except the extensive documentation and video evidence makes that narrative impossible, Bradley said. "Your family was remarkably thorough in planning the crime, but remarkably stupid in its execution." "So the insurance will pay out?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "Oh, absolutely. This is clearly a covered loss. But Ms. Henderson, I need to share something with you." Bradley's expression grew serious. "In my investigation, I discovered something odd. A safe deposit box listed in the policy documentation, one that supposedly contains additional papers related to the community center project." I frowned. "I don't have any safe deposit box." "According to our records, it was added to the policy 6 months ago by Rose Henderson herself." My heart stopped. Grandma Rose, but she was already sick then. She could barely leave her bed. "Nevertheless, her signature is on the documentation, and it was notarized by Harold Whitman." Bradley slid a key across the desk. "As part of the claim investigation, you should examine the contents. Box 427 at First National." The number made me gasp. 427, the same as the community center's address on Maple Street. Grandma Rose and her love of meaningful numbers. Sarah and I exchanged glances. "We'll go immediately," she said. An hour later, we stood in the bank's vault, the small key trembling in my hand. Monica had joined us, providing moral support as I opened the box that my grandmother had secretly prepared. Inside were 3 envelopes and a small leather journal. The first envelope was marked, "For Krista, open first." With shaking hands, I unfolded the letter inside, written in Grandma Rose's distinctive handwriting. My dearest Krista, if you're reading this, then I was right to be concerned. I've watched Patricia's jealousy and Jake's weakness for years, hoping they would change. But some people let greed poison their hearts beyond repair. I've known Patricia was capable of terrible things since she stole from my checking account 5 years ago. I never told you because I hoped she would repent. But a mother knows her children even when they disappoint her. In this box, you'll find everything you need to protect yourself and our dream. The community center isn't just a building, it's hope for children who need it. Buildings can be rebuilt. Dreams endure. Trust Harold, trust yourself, and know that I'm so proud of the woman you've become. All my love, Grandma Rose. Tears streamed down my face as I reached for the second envelope marked legal documentation. Inside were copies of checks Patricia had forged, the records of money Jake had stolen from Grandma's accounts, and a detailed timeline of their financial crimes going back years. Grandma Rose had known everything and documented it all. She was building a case, Sarah said in amazement. She knew they might try something like this. The third envelope made us all gasp. It contained documents for a secondary insurance policy one Patricia and Jake knew nothing about. A policy that would provide additional funds specifically for rebuilding if the primary structure was destroyed by arson. She planned for this contingency, Bradley said when we called him. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. But it was the leather journal that revealed the biggest shock. Page after page of Grandma Rose's notes about Patricia's schemes, Jake's debts to dangerous people, and her fears for what they might do when she passed. The final entry, dated just days before her death, was damning. Patricia visited today with a new friend, Dr. Morton. They thought I was asleep when they discussed having Krista committed after I'm gone. I've called Harold to add protections to my will, but I fear it won't be enough. Patricia has always been ruthless when she wants something. I pray I'm wrong about what she's capable of, but if I'm not, this journal will speak when I no longer can. This is evidence of conspiracy dating back months, Sarah said, potentially years. Your grandmother documented a pattern of criminal behavior that will be devastating in court. As we left the bank, I clutched the journal to my chest. Grandma Rose had protected me even from beyond the grave, anticipating her own daughter's evil and preparing for it. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing everything with Monica, Sarah, and Bradley. The insurance investigator had become an unexpected ally, disgusted by what he'd uncovered. With both insurance policies, you'll have more than enough to rebuild, he assured me. The secondary policy specifically covers malicious destruction by family members. Your grandmother thought of everything. She knew them better than I did, I said sadly. She saw what they were capable of and tried to protect the dream anyway. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My blood chilled as I read, "You think you've won? This isn't over. We know where you live." But this time I wasn't afraid. I had Grandma Rose's journal, mountains of evidence, and the truth on my side. I screenshotted the threat and added it to the growing pile of evidence. Let them threaten, I said firmly. Every text, every call, every action just adds to their prison sentences. Bradley stood to leave, shaking my hand firmly. The full insurance settlement will be processed within 2 weeks. Both policies. Your community center will rise from these ashes, Ms. Henderson. Your grandmother made sure of it. As he reached the door, he paused. Oh, I almost forgot. There's going to be an announcement tomorrow about the fire investigation findings. The fire chief discovered something interesting about the accelerant pattern. You might want to watch the news. After everyone left, I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Patricia and Jake sat in their jail cells, probably still plotting. But they had lost more than they knew. They'd lost their freedom, their reputations, and any claim to moral high ground they might have imagined they had. Most importantly, they'd underestimated Grandma Rose's love and foresight. She'd known her daughter's dark heart and her grandson's weakness, and she'd planned accordingly. The community center would be rebuilt stronger and better than before. Thank you, Grandma, I whispered to the night sky, for believing in me, for protecting me, for making sure your dream survives even the worst our family could do. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more revelations, and the beginning of criminal trials that would shake our city. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the fire hope. The building had burned, but the foundation of justice was stronger than ever. And on that foundation, we would rebuild everything they tried to destroy. The morning after discovering Grandma Rose's journal, I woke to my phone buzzing insistently. Monica's name flashed on the screen, and her voice was breathless with excitement when I answered. Krista, you need to come to my apartment right now. Bring Sarah if you can. I found something. Within an hour, Sarah Chen and I sat in Monica's living room, watching her pace, back and forth with barely contained energy. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table, multiple windows displaying what looked like security footage. Remember how I've been backing up all the construction site footage to my personal cloud storage? Monica began. I'm paranoid about data loss, so I set up an automatic backup system that saved everything every hour. We know, I said gently, but the cameras were disabled before the fire. That's what we thought, Monica interrupted. But I had installed a secondary hidden camera system 2 weeks ago. I didn't even tell you because I wanted to test it first. Its motion-activated uploads directly to the cloud and has its own power source. Sarah leaned forward. Are you saying? I'm saying I have clear footage of everything that happened that night. Everything. Monica turned her laptop toward us, including this. She hit play and my breath caught. The footage showed Patricia, Jake, and Margaret arriving at the construction site an hour before the fire. But there was a fourth person with them, someone I recognized with a shock that made my blood run cold. Is that Daniel Morrison? I gasped, recognizing the man who owned Morrison Construction, our biggest competitor for city contracts. Monica nodded grimly. Keep watching. The footage showed Morrison handing Patricia what looked like architectural drawings. They talked for several minutes, Morrison pointing at various spots on the building. Then he handed Jake a bag that, when opened, revealed bottles of accelerant and what appeared to be timing devices. He supplied them, Sarah breathed. This goes beyond family revenge. This is corporate sabotage. It gets worse, Monica said, switching to another file. This is from 3 weeks ago. The new footage showed Morrison meeting with Patricia at a coffee shop near the construction site. The camera angle allowed us to see Patricia sliding documents across the table, documents that looked suspiciously like our building permits and inspection schedules. She was feeding him information, I said, pieces falling into place. That's how they knew exactly when to strike, which inspections were coming up, where our vulnerabilities were. And in exchange, Monica pulled up another file. He promised her this. She showed us a screenshot from Morrison's company email obtained through means Monica wouldn't elaborate on. The email outlined plans for a Henderson Family Community Center to be built by Morrison Construction, with Patricia listed as the founding director at a salary of $200,000 per year. They were going to steal everything, Sarah said in disgust. Not just the money, but the very concept of the community center. Rebrand it as their own charitable venture. But here's the smoking gun, Monica said, her eyes gleaming with triumph. She pulled up one final video. This is from inside the building during the fire from my hidden camera in the main office. The footage showed Jake inside, but he wasn't alone. Morrison was with him, directing him where to pour the accelerant. But what made my heart stop was what Morrison said, clearly audible on the recording. Remember, it has to look like electrical. Pour extra here where the junction box is. I've got the fire inspector ready to rule it as faulty wiring. Your sister's cheap contractors will take the blame. You bribed the fire inspector too, Jake asked on the recording. Morrison's laugh was cold. Let's just say Inspector Coleman owes me enough favors to retire on. This building burns, your sister gets blamed for cutting corners, and I get the contract to build the new one. Everyone wins except Little Miss Perfect. This is massive, Sarah said, already pulling out her phone. We need to get this to the FBI immediately. This is conspiracy, bribery, arson, corporate fraud. Morrison's looking at decades in prison. But Monica wasn't done. There's more. After I found all this, I did some digging into Morrison Construction's past projects. Guess what I found? She pulled up news articles dating back 5 years. 3 other community projects had suffered fires during construction. All 3 had been competing with Morrison for city contracts. All 3 fires had been ruled accidental faulty wiring, chemical storage issues, worker negligence. He's done this before, I said, horror dawning. How many people's dreams has he destroyed? At least 3 that we can document, Monica replied. But I bet there are more. And guess who signed off on all those fire investigations? Inspector Coleman, Sarah and I said in unison. Within hours, our living room had transformed into a crisis command center. FBI agents arrived to copy all the footage, their expressions growing grimmer with each revelation. Agent Delgado, who had been investigating the arson, looked like she'd struck gold. "This breaks the case wide open," she told us. "We're not just looking at your family anymore. This is organized crime, racketeering, a conspiracy that goes back years." As if the universe wanted to emphasize the point, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the detention center where Patricia and Jake were being held. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You little witch," Patricia's voice seethed through the phone. "You think you're so clever. Morrison's lawyers will destroy you. You have no idea who you're messing with." "Actually, I do," I said calmly. "I know he's been burning down buildings for profit. I know he bribed Inspector Coleman. And I know you sold out your own mother's dream for a job title and a paycheck." Silence. Then, "You can't prove any of that." "Can't I? Did you know Monica installed hidden cameras? Did you know they caught Morrison explaining exactly how to make the arson look accidental? Did you know we have footage of him bribing the fire inspector?" The silence stretched longer this time. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had lost its venom, replaced by something like fear. "Morrison will kill us all if this gets out. You don't understand. He has connections, people who make problems disappear." "Then you should have thought of that before you got in bed with him," I said. "Enjoy prison, mother. It's going to be your home for a very long time." I hung up on her protests, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Sarah put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing. They made their choices." The next day, the arrests began. Daniel Morrison was taken into custody at his office, the FBI seizing computers and documents. Inspector Coleman was arrested at home, his wife screaming about frame-ups as they led him away. 3 more Morrison construction employees were arrested for their roles in previous arsons. But the biggest shock came when the FBI revealed what they'd found in Morrison's files. Patricia hadn't just sold him information about our project, she'd been feeding him details about every major construction project in the city for the past 2 years. In exchange, he'd been paying her through a shell company deposits totaling nearly $300,000. "Your mother was running a corporate espionage ring," Agent Delgado explained. "She used her social connections to gather information about construction projects, then sold that intelligence to Morrison. He used it to underbid, sabotage, or steal contracts." Jake, it turned out, had been the weak link Morrison needed. Deeply in debt to loan sharks, debts Morrison had quietly purchased, Jake had been under Morrison's thumb for months. The businessman had orchestrated everything using my family's greed and desperation as weapons against me. That evening, as I sat with Monica reviewing the insurance paperwork to rebuild, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My finger hovered over the delete button until I read the first line. "Ms. Henderson, my name is James Morrison. I'm Daniel's son. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need to speak with you. My father destroyed my mother's charity 5 years ago using the same methods. I have evidence you need to see." Monica read over my shoulder. "It could be a trap. Or it could be another victim wanting justice," I replied. I texted back, "Tomorrow noon, FBI field office. You can share your evidence with them." The response was immediate. "Thank you. My father needs to be stopped. I'm sorry for what he did to your grandmother's dream." As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the web of corruption we'd uncovered. What had started as simple family greed had revealed a criminal enterprise that had destroyed countless dreams and lives. Tomorrow, James Morrison would add his evidence to our case. Next week, the trials would begin. But tonight, I pulled out the new architectural plans Monica and I had been working on. The new community center would be even better than the original, with a memorial garden for Grandma Rose and plaques honoring all the dreams that had been destroyed by greed but refused to die. We're going to build it, I told Monica, not just for Grandma, but for everyone Morrison and my family hurt. We're going to build something so beautiful, so strong that no amount of corruption can tear it down. Monica smiled, pulling up her tablet. I've already started a fundraising page. Once this story breaks, I think you'll be surprised how many people want to help. Your grandmother's dream is about to become the city's mission. She was right. By morning, as news of the conspiracy spread, donations began pouring in. Messages of support flooded my inbox. Other victims of Morrison's schemes reached out sharing their stories. The fire had revealed more than just my family's greed. It had exposed a cancer in our city's heart. And in cutting it out, we weren't just rebuilding one community center. We were rebuilding faith and justice itself. The ashes were still warm, but from them, something far greater than a building was already beginning to rise. The arrests happened simultaneously at 6 in the morning, coordinated across multiple locations like a choreographed dance of justice. I watched from my apartment window as FBI agents led Daniel Morrison away in handcuffs from his mansion across town, the news helicopters circling overhead like mechanical vultures. Monica had stayed the night, and we sat glued to the television as the story unfolded. Breaking news, the anchor announced, in what authorities are calling one of the largest corruption cases in the city's history. Business mogul Daniel Morrison has been arrested on charges of arson, racketeering, bribery, and conspiracy. 3 members of the Henderson family are also in custody. The footage switched to Patricia being transferred to federal custody, her orange jumpsuit a far cry from her usual designer suits. Even in chains, she held her head high, that familiar, prideful tilt to her chin that suggested the world, not her, was wrong. Jake looked different, broken, hollow-eyed, shuffling along like a man who'd aged 20 years overnight. When reporters shouted questions, he just stared straight ahead, lost in whatever private hell his choices had created. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, distant relatives suddenly concerned about family unity, and others I hadn't heard from in years. I let them all go to voicemail. There would be time for statements later. Right now, I needed to process the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. Sarah Chen arrived at 9 with coffee and case files. The prosecutor wants to meet with you this afternoon. Your testimony will be crucial, but first, there's something you need to see. She handed me a transcript from Jake's interrogation. As I read, my heart sank further with each page. I never wanted it to go this far, Jake had told the FBI. It started with me owing the wrong people money. Morrison bought my debts, said he'd forgive them if I just passed along some information about Krista's project. Then Mom found out, and instead of being angry, she saw an opportunity. The transcript detailed how Patricia had orchestrated everything, turning Jake's desperation into a weapon. She'd convinced him that I'd stolen their rightful inheritance, that Grandma Rose had been manipulated into cutting them out. The poison of her lies had infected Jake so thoroughly that burning down the community center seemed like justice rather than the crime it was. There's more, Sarah said gently. Margaret Sullivan flipped completely. She's providing evidence about other families Patricia targeted over the years. Other families. Sarah pulled out another file. Your mother has been running variations of this scheme since before your grandmother died. She would befriend wealthy elderly people, gain their trust, then try to manipulate their wills. When that failed, she'd orchestrate family conflicts to contest the inheritance. The list of names made me sick. Mrs. Chen from the senior center, whose children suddenly fought over her estate. Mr. Williams, whose nephew mysteriously decided his uncle was incompetent. The Johnsons, whose family foundation dissolved in accusations and lawsuits. All of them had Patricia's fingerprints hidden in the background. She's a professional predator, I whispered. My phone buzzed with a text from Harold Whitman, Grandma Rose's attorney. Can you come by my office? There's something in your grandmother's files you need to see. An hour later, I sat in Harold's familiar office, the morning sun casting long shadows across his desk. He looked older than I remembered, the weight of recent revelations etched in new lines on his face. "I've been going through Rose's complete files," he began, pulling out a thick folder. "She left more than just the letter in the safe deposit box. She documented everything, Krista. Every suspicious transaction, every manipulative conversation, every scheme Patricia attempted." He showed me photographs of forged checks, recordings of conversations where Patricia tried to convince Grandma Rose to change her will, even medical records showing Patricia had been drugging her mother with sleeping pills to make her seem more confused than she was. "Your grandmother pretended to be more ill than she was," Harold explained. "She let Patricia believe her schemes were working while documenting everything. Rose was building a federal case. She just didn't live long enough to file it." "Why didn't she just cut Patricia off?" I asked, tears stinging my eyes. Harold's expression was infinitely sad. "Because she was her mother. She kept hoping Patricia would change, would choose love over greed. Even in her final letter to me, she wrote about praying for Patricia's soul while preparing for her betrayal." That afternoon, I met with federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh in a conference room that felt more like a fortress than a meeting space. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for taking down corrupt politicians. "Your family members are maintaining their innocence despite overwhelming evidence," she began. "They've hired expensive lawyers, interesting considering their supposed financial desperation. Morrison's paying, I guessed." "We believe so. He's trying to keep them quiet about the full extent of his operations. But here's where it gets interesting. James Morrison contacted us this morning. He's been gathering evidence against his father for years." She showed me documents. James had provided proof that Morrison construction had burned down at least 12 buildings over 2 decades, always with the same pattern. Small community projects that competed with his bids. Local inspectors paid off. Families destroyed. "Your grandmother's community center was supposed to be his masterpiece," Walsh explained. "The biggest project yet, with your mother installed as director to funnel city funds to his company for years to come." "But they didn't count on Monica's hidden cameras," I said. Walsh smiled grimly. "Or your grandmother's foresight, or you refusing to give up. They thought you'd crumble when the building burned. Instead, you exposed an entire criminal network." That evening, I attended a rally Monica had organized at the site of the burned community center. I expected a few dozen supporters. Instead, hundreds of people filled the lot holding candles and signs reading, "Rose's Dream Lives On" and "Build It Better." James Morrison stood at the edge of the crowd, clearly nervous. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes that spoke of carrying heavy secrets. When our eyes met, he approached slowly. "I'm sorry," he said simply, "for what my father did, for not speaking up sooner." "How long have you known?" I asked. "Since I was 15. I saw him pay off an inspector after a competitor's warehouse burned down. When I confronted him, he laughed, said it was just business." James's voice cracked. "My mother left him after he burned down her charity's building. She died thinking it was an accident. I've been collecting evidence ever since, waiting for the right moment." "Why now?" He gestured at the crowd. "Because your grandmother's dream deserved better. Because you fought back instead of giving up. Because maybe finally there's enough evidence to stop him." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. The detention center again. This time I put it on speaker for Sarah and James to hear. "Krista," Patricia's voice was different, desperate, almost panicked. "You have to stop this. You don't understand what you've done. Morrison has connections, people who..." "People who, what, mother?" I interrupted. "People who burn down buildings. People who destroy dreams. We know all about Morrison's connections. They're being arrested too." "You stupid girl," she shrieked. "This isn't just about money anymore. These people don't leave witnesses. They'll come after all of us, you, me, Jake. Everyone who knows." The line went dead. Sarah immediately called her FBI contact while James went pale. "She's right about one thing," he said quietly. "My father's partners don't forgive betrayal. We're all going to need protection." Within an hour, FBI agents had arrived to discuss security measures. The case had expanded beyond simple arson to include organized crime elements. Patricia's warnings meant to frighten me into dropping charges had instead revealed another layer of corruption. But as I stood before the crowd that night sharing plans for the new community center, I felt no fear, only determination. The people holding candles weren't just supporting a building, they were standing against the corruption that had plagued our city for decades. My grandmother believed in the power of community, I told them. She knew that when good people stand together, no amount of greed or corruption can defeat them. They burned our building, but they only made our foundation stronger. The crowd erupted in cheers. Donations were pledged on the spot. City council members promised expedited permits. Construction companies, legitimate ones, offered services at cost. That night, as Monica and I reviewed the outpouring of support, my phone buzzed with one final message. This time from Jake, through his lawyer. I want to testify. Tell you everything. Morrison threatened to kill me if I didn't help. Mom said it was the only way to save my life. I'm sorry, Krista. I'm so sorry. Please, let me try to make this right. I stared at the message for a long time. My brother, weak and greedy as he was, might finally be ready to choose family over fear. Tomorrow, I would meet with him, hear his story, and decide if redemption was possible for any of them. But tonight, I stood in the ashes of the old dream and saw the foundation of the new one already taking shape. Stronger, broader, supported not just by one woman's vision, but by an entire community's determination to see justice done. The war my family started had become something bigger, a battle for the soul of our city. And we were winning. The federal detention center felt like a fortress of concrete and broken dreams. I sat in the sterile visiting room waiting for Jake to be brought in. Sarah Chen sat beside me, her presence both professional and protective. Through the reinforced glass, I watched my brother shuffle in, shackled and diminished. Jake looked like a ghost of himself. The cocky swagger was gone, replaced by something raw and frightened. When he sat down and picked up the phone, his hand trembled. Krista, his voice cracked through the receiver. Thank you for coming. Your lawyer said you want to testify, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Why now? Jake glanced nervously at the guard, then leaned closer to the glass. Because Morrison's people already tried to kill me 2 days ago in the shower. If the guards hadn't intervened, he pulled down his collar, revealing dark bruises around his throat. Sarah immediately began documenting the injuries with her phone. Have you reported this to who? Jake laughed bitterly. Half the guards here are probably on Morrison's payroll. The only reason I'm alive is because the FBI put me in protective custody after the first attempt. Tell me everything, I said, from the beginning. Over the next hour, Jake unraveled a story more twisted than I'd imagined. His gambling debts hadn't been from casual betting. Morrison had orchestrated his losses, using rigged games and predatory loans to trap him. When Jake couldn't pay, Morrison bought the debts and owned him completely. He said it was perfect, Jake explained, having someone inside the family who could feed him information. At first, it was just little things, construction schedules, budget details. Then Mom found out. And instead of helping you, she saw an opportunity, I finished. Jake nodded miserably. She said this was our chance to get what we deserved, that you'd stolen our future by taking all of Grandma's money. She made it sound so reasonable, like we were just reclaiming what was ours. When did the plan turn to arson? That was all Morrison. When the legal challenges failed, he said there were other ways. Mom was hesitant at first. She wanted the money, not prison. But Morrison showed her the contracts, the salary she'd get running the new center. $200,000 a year, Krista. She saw dollar signs and stopped caring about anything else. Sarah interrupted gently. Jake, we need specifics. Names, dates, evidence we can use in court. Jake nodded and began providing detailed information meetings at Morrison's office, phone calls with burner phones, even the location of a storage unit where Morrison kept records of his previous arsons. There's something else, Jake said as our time ran short. The night of the fire, Morrison said something. He laughed and told Mom that Grandma Rose was smarter than all of us, that she'd seen this coming. What do you mean? He said Harold Whitman had been asking questions investigating Patricia's finances months before Grandma died. Morrison thought it was funny, the old lady playing detective from her deathbed. That afternoon, I went straight to Harold Whitman's office. The elderly attorney greeted me with sad eyes and a thick manila envelope. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said. "After Jake's arrest, I debated whether to give you this. Rose made me promise to wait until the right moment. I believe that moment has arrived." Inside the envelope was another letter from Grandma Rose, this one longer and more detailed than anything I'd seen before. As I read it, my hands began to shake. "My dearest Krista, if you're reading this letter, then my worst fears have come to pass. By now, Patricia and Jake have likely done something terrible in their greed for money that was never meant for them. I need you to know the truth, all of it. Patricia is not just greedy, she's dangerous. I've enclosed evidence of her crimes going back 20 years. The forged checks, the elderly friends she's swindled, the lives she's destroyed for money. I hired a private investigator. Reports are in Harold's safe. But there's more. Patricia has been involved with Daniel Morrison for longer than you know. They met at a charity function 5 years ago. She's been feeding him information about construction projects ever since, taking payments through shell companies. I have the bank records. I knew she would come for the inheritance. That's why I structured it as I did, not just to build the community center, but to protect you and expose her. The center was bait, Krista. I knew Patricia couldn't resist trying to steal it, and in doing so, she would reveal her true nature to the world. I'm sorry for using you this way, my dear one, but you're strong enough to handle the truth and brave enough to see justice done. Patricia is my daughter, and I'll always love her, but I cannot let her hurt more innocent people. In Harold's safe, you'll also find information about other families she's targeted. Please make sure they get justice, too. The community center matters, but not as much as stopping Patricia's reign of terror. Build it if you can, but know that your real inheritance isn't money. It's the strength to stand up to evil even when it wears a familiar face. I've also set aside funds in a separate trust, one Patricia knows nothing about. Harold will explain the details. This money is specifically for prosecuting anyone who tries to stop the community center through illegal means. I suspected Morrison might be involved given Patricia's association with him. One last thing, check the basement of the old house on Elm Street, the one where I grew up. Under the floorboards, beneath the stairs, you'll find my insurance policy. Not the official one, but my real insurance evidence I've gathered over the years. Patricia doesn't know this house still exists. I kept it under a trust she never knew about. Be careful, my brave girl. Be smart, and know that I am so proud of you. All my love, Grandma Rose. Harold watched as I finished reading, tears streaming down my face. She knew, I whispered. She knew everything. She was a remarkable woman, Harold agreed. She spent her last years preparing for this possibility. There's more. He opened his safe and pulled out box after box of documents. Private investigator reports, financial records, recorded conversations. Your grandmother built a federal case over 5 years. Why didn't she just go to the police? Harold's expression was pained. She kept hoping Patricia would change. Even knowing what her daughter was capable of, she loved her. Rose thought if she removed the temptation, structured the will to prevent theft, Patricia might choose differently. But she prepared for the worst, I said. She did, and there's one more thing. Harold handed me a key. The Elm Street house. Rose left it to you separately, never told anyone. Said you'd know when to use it. That evening, Sarah, Monica, and 2 FBI agents accompanied me to the abandoned-looking house on Elm Street. From the outside, it appeared forgotten, overgrown yard, peeling paint, newspapers piling up on the porch. The perfect cover. Inside, beneath layers of dust, the house was a time capsule. Photos of Grandma Rose's childhood covered the walls, but we weren't here for nostalgia. In the basement, exactly where her letter indicated, we found a sealed metal box. The contents made even the seasoned FBI agents whistle. Photos of Patricia meeting with Morrison dating back 5 years. audio recordings of her discussing plans to defraud elderly clients, bank statements showing deposits from Morrison's shell companies, and most damning, a handwritten journal where Patricia had detailed her crimes, apparently keeping score of her successes. This is Agent Delgado shook her head. This is a prosecutor's dream. Your grandmother didn't just gather evidence, she built an airtight case. Among the papers was another envelope addressed to me. Inside a shorter note, Krista, if you're reading this, you're stronger than you know. Use this evidence to protect others. Build the center not for me, but for all the children who need hope. And remember, family isn't always blood. It's the people who stand by you when darkness falls. Love, Grandma. As we cataloged the evidence, my phone rang. Jennifer Walsh, the federal prosecutor, sounded excited. Jake's testimony is checking out. The storage unit he mentioned was full of evidence. Morrison kept trophies from every building he burned. He's finished, Krista. They're all finished. That night, I sat in Grandma Rose's secret house, surrounded by evidence of my mother's crimes and my grandmother's love. The woman who'd raised me had seen all of this coming and prepared for it with the patience of a chess master. You set the board, I said to her photo on the mantel, moved all the pieces into place, even made yourself appear weaker than you were so they'd reveal themselves. Monica found me there an hour later. The prosecutor called. With this new evidence, they're adding 23 more counts against Patricia. She'll never see freedom again. What about Jake? He's agreed to full cooperation. With the attempt on his life and his testimony, he might get 10 years instead of 30. The prosecutor says he was more of Morrison's victim than accomplice. I nodded slowly. Jake was weak, not evil. Prison might actually save him from himself. As we left the house, I took one last look around. This place had been Grandma Rose's command center where she'd waged a silent war against her own daughter's corruption. Now it would become evidence, every document another nail in Patricia's coffin. She protected the whole city, Monica said softly. Not just you or the community center. She protected everyone Patricia might have hurt. In the car, heading back to face the media storm that would follow these revelations, I thought about family. Patricia had given birth to me, but spent her life trying to destroy what I loved. Grandma Rose, who shared no blood with me, I was adopted, had loved me enough to wage war against her own daughter. Tomorrow I would stand in court and present this evidence. I would watch my mother face justice for decades of crimes. I would see Morrison's empire crumble and his victims finally get closure. But tonight, I held Grandma Rose's final letter and understood the truth. She hadn't just left me money for a community center. She'd left me a mission to stand against corruption wherever I found it, even when it wore my mother's face. The community center would be built. But more importantly, justice would be served. And somewhere, Grandma Rose was smiling, knowing her real legacy wasn't a building, but the courage to fight for what's right. 6 months after the fire, the criminal trial that would captivate the nation began on a crisp Monday morning. The courthouse steps were packed with media from across the country, their cameras trained on every arrival. I walked through the crowd with Sarah Chen on one side and Monica on the other, ignoring the shouted questions and clicking shutters. Inside courtroom 1. The largest in the federal building, the atmosphere was electric. This wasn't just about arson anymore. It was about a criminal conspiracy that had infected our city for decades. 23 defendants filled the defense tables with Patricia and Morrison at the center like the king and queen of a corrupt chessboard. Federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh stood with the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. Her opening statement was a masterpiece of controlled fury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "what you will hear over the coming weeks is not just a story of greed and betrayal. It is a tale of systematic corruption that turned family bonds into weapons and charity into a tool for theft. The defendants didn't just burn a building, they tried to burn the very idea of justice itself." She outlined the case with surgical precision. Morrison's 2 decades of arson for profit, Patricia's elderly victims scattered across the state, The web of bribed officials and intimidated witnesses, and at the center, the attempted destruction of Rose Henderson's final gift to her community. When the defense attorneys gave their openings, they tried to paint their clients as victims of circumstance, manipulated by others, caught up in events beyond their control. Patricia's attorney, a slick man named Richard Graves, actually argued that she was suffering from grief-induced psychosis. My client lost her mother and wasn't thinking clearly, Graves intoned. She was manipulated by Daniel Morrison, a predator who took advantage of a grieving daughter. I almost laughed at the audacity. Patricia sat there in a conservative suit trying to look like a bereaved daughter rather than the mastermind she was. But her eyes gave her away cold calculating, watching the jury for any sign of sympathy she could exploit. The prosecution's first witness was James Morrison. Daniel's son took the stand with the weight of 20 years of secrets on his shoulders. His testimony was devastating. My father started burning buildings when I was 10. James said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. He called it urban renewal, said he was doing the city a favor by clearing out old structures for better ones. It took me years to understand he was destroying people's dreams for profit. He detailed his father's methods, the bribed inspectors, the staged accidents the shell companies used to hide profits. He presented documents he'd stolen from his father's safe recordings of conversations where Morrison laughed about his crimes. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Walsh asked gently. James's voice broke. "Because he was my father. Because I was scared. Because I thought someone else would stop him. I was a coward and people suffered for it. I can't undo that, but I can make sure he never hurts anyone again." The cross-examination was brutal, with Morrison's attorney trying to paint James as a bitter son seeking revenge, but James held firm, his regret and determination unshakable. Next came the technical witnesses. Fire investigators explained the arson patterns. Financial experts traced the money trails. The corrupted fire inspector Coleman had flipped for a reduced sentence and detailed exactly how Morrison had paid him to falsify reports. But it was on the third day that the prosecution played its ace, Grandma Rose's video depositions. I had known they existed, but hadn't been allowed to see them before the trial. As my grandmother's face appeared on the courtroom screens, I had to grip Sarah's hand to keep from sobbing. "My name is Rose Marie Henderson," Grandma said, looking directly into the camera with those wise eyes I missed so much. "I am recording this testimony because I fear I will not live to see justice done." Over the next 2 hours, Grandma Rose methodically laid out everything she'd discovered about Patricia's crimes. She presented evidence with the precision of a trained investigator, her voice never wavering even when discussing her own daughter's betrayal. "I failed Patricia as a mother," she said near the end. "I gave her everything except consequences for her actions. I enabled her greed by always bailing her out. This community center is my attempt to make amends, not just to build something good, but to finally hold her accountable." The courtroom was silent when the video ended. Several jurors were wiping their eyes. Even the judge seemed moved by the dignity and pain in Grandma Rose's testimony. Patricia's reaction was telling. Instead of tears or shame, her face contorted with rage. She whispered furiously to her attorney, gesturing at the screen as if she could argue with a ghost. On day 4, I took the stand. Jennifer Walsh walked me through the entire story, discovering the inheritance, the family meeting, the escalating threats, the fire. I presented every piece of evidence, every recording, every threatening message. "How did you feel when you realized your own mother was trying to have you declared incompetent?" Walsh asked. "Heartbroken," I admitted, but not surprised. I'd spent my childhood watching her manipulate others. I just never thought I'd become her target. The defense's cross-examination was predictably aggressive. Graves tried to paint me as a selfish daughter, hoarding money meant for the family. He suggested I'd fabricated evidence that I was mentally unstable, just as Patricia had claimed. "Isn't it true you've been estranged from your mother for years?" he pressed. "Yes," I replied calmly. "Because she stole my college fund when I was 17. Because she tried to claim my scholarship money. Because every interaction with her involved her trying to take something from me. So you admit you have a bias against her. I have a bias against thieves, I said firmly. The fact that she gave birth to me doesn't change what she is. Morrison's attorney tried a different tack, suggesting I was part of a conspiracy with James Morrison to take down his client. But every accusation fell flat against the mountain of evidence we'd presented. On day 5, the prosecution played Monica's hidden camera footage. Watching Morrison direct the arson in real time, hearing him brag about bribing officials, seeing him hand over the accelerants, it was damning beyond any defense attorney's ability to spin. Then came Jake's testimony via video link from protective custody. My brother looked directly at the camera as he spoke. I was weak, he said. I was scared. Morrison owned my debts and threatened to have me killed if I didn't cooperate. But I made the choice to light that fire. I destroyed my grandmother's dream because I was a coward and a fool. He detailed every meeting, every payment, every threat. When asked about Patricia's role, he didn't hold back. Mom orchestrated everything. She saw Morrison as a meal ticket and me as a tool. She convinced me that Krista had stolen from us, that burning the center was justice. I wanted to believe her because it was easier than admitting I was helping her commit crimes. The defense phase of the trial was almost comical in its desperation. Patricia took the stand against her attorney's advice, unable to resist the chance to spin her narrative. It was a disaster. Under cross-examination, she contradicted herself repeatedly, claimed evidence was fabricated even when caught on video, and eventually erupted in rage. That money was mine, she screamed at Jennifer Walsh. I was her daughter. I deserved more than some pathetic community center Rose owed me. For what? Walsh asked calmly. For everything. For my whole life, she always loved Krista more, always put others before her own daughter. I was entitled to that money. The mask had finally slipped completely. The jury saw Patricia Henderson for what she truly was, a narcissist who viewed her mother's love as a commodity she was owed payment for. Morrison didn't testify, maintaining his innocence through his attorneys, but the evidence was overwhelming. 23 fires over 20 years, millions in insurance fraud, lives destroyed for profit. The other defendants fell like dominoes. Inspector Coleman pleaded guilty and testified about the extent of the bribery network. Margaret Sullivan sobbed through her testimony about how Patricia had manipulated her. Lower-level conspirators rushed to make deals, each adding another layer to the prosecution's case. On the final day of testimony, Jennifer Walsh recalled me to the stand for redirect. Ms. Henderson, she said, despite everything that's happened, do you still plan to build the community center? Yes, I said firmly. It's already under construction. The new building will be safer, stronger, and serve even more children than originally planned. Why continue after all this pain? I looked at Patricia, who glared back with undiminished hatred. Then I turned to the jury. Because that's how you defeat corruption and greed, not by giving up, but by building something better from the ashes. My grandmother knew her daughter was capable of this. She prepared for it, gathered evidence, and made sure justice would be done. But she never stopped believing in the good we could do. Neither will I. What will you call it? The Rose Henderson Center for Hope and Justice, I said, because Grandma Rose taught me that the two go hand in hand. As closing arguments began, I sat in the gallery surrounded by supporters. Monica, Sarah Chen, construction workers who'd volunteered to rebuild families who would benefit from the center. Even James Morrison sat with us, having become an unexpected ally in pursuing justice. Jennifer Walsh's closing was brilliant. She walked the jury through each crime, each piece of evidence, each life destroyed by greed. She showed how Patricia and Morrison had conspired not just to steal money, but to corrupt the very systems meant to protect people. They didn't just burn a building, she concluded. They tried to burn hope itself. Your verdict will determine whether they succeeded or whether justice can rise from those ashes. The defense closings were desperate attempts to create reasonable doubt where none existed. They blamed each other, claimed entrapment, suggested mental illness, threw every possible defense at the wall, hoping something would stick. As the jury filed out to deliberate, I stood to leave. Patricia called out from the defense table. Krista. I turned, meeting her eyes one last time. I'm your mother, she said, as if that fact could still be weaponized. No, I replied quietly. You're just the woman who gave birth to me. Rose Henderson was my mother in every way that mattered. I walked out of the courtroom, leaving Patricia to face the consequences of her choices. The war she'd started was almost over, and she had lost everything: her freedom, her schemes, her delusions of entitlement. But the biggest loss was one she'd never understand. She'd lost the daughter who might have loved her if only she'd chosen love over money just once in her life. The jury had been deliberating for 2 days when Jake was brought in for additional testimony. A last-minute revelation from the Morrison storage unit had uncovered documents suggesting the conspiracy went even deeper than previously thought. The judge had recalled the jury to hear this crucial evidence. I sat in the gallery as they brought Jake in under heavy guard. He'd lost at least 30 pounds, his former bulk replaced by a gauntness that made him look older than his years. The attempted murder in prison had left him with a permanent scar across his throat, a reminder of the price of crossing Daniel Morrison. As he took the stand again, his eyes found mine in the crowd. For a moment, I saw my brother, not the greedy conspirator, but the boy who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd shared his Halloween candy, who'd protected me from bullies before he became one himself. Mr. Henderson, Jennifer Walsh began. You've indicated you have additional information about the conspiracy that you previously withheld out of fear. Can you explain? Jake gripped the microphone with white knuckles. Morrison had a list, he said, his voice hoarse. Properties he planned to burn over the next 5 years. The community center was just the beginning. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Walsh displayed the documents on the screen, a detailed plan targeting homeless shelters, youth programs, and low-income housing projects across the city. Each property had been researched, vulnerabilities identified, and potential profits calculated. Morrison called it his retirement plan, Jake continued. He said poor people's buildings were easy targets because no one cared enough to investigate properly. He was going to systematically destroy every charitable construction project in the city and rebuild them through his company. And your mother knew about this? Walsh asked. Jake's face crumbled. She helped plan it, said it was brilliant, playing the grieving daughter while secretly running the new centers. She had budgets drawn up, staff picked out. She was going to build an empire on the ashes of other people's dreams. The prosecutor showed financial projections. Patricia had created millions in diverted fund salaries for family members, kickbacks hidden as consulting fees. It was breathtakingly ambitious in its evil. There's more, Jake said, his voice growing stronger. The night of the fire, Morrison told Mom about a judge he owned. Said if things went bad, Judge Clarence would make sure they got light sentences. He named 3 other officials on his payroll. This bombshell sent the prosecution scrambling. The judge called a recess, while FBI agents moved to investigate these new allegations. When we reconvened, Jennifer Walsh looked like a cat who'd caught a flock of canaries. Your Honor, she announced, based on Mr. Henderson's testimony, federal agents have arrested Judge Peter Clarence and are investigating 3 other officials. We may need to expand this trial. The judge, not Clarence, thankfully nodded grimly. Proceed with your examination. Jake's testimony continued for hours. He revealed how Patricia had been siphoning money from Grandma Rose for years, using her position as power of attorney to fund her lifestyle while Grandma pretended not to notice. He detailed meetings where Morrison and Patricia planned not just arson, but extortion, blackmail, and fraud. Did you ever try to stop them? Walsh asked. Once, Jake admitted. About a month before the fire, I told Mom we should just accept Krista had won. Morrison heard about it and sent 2 men to my apartment. They didn't hurt me, just showed me photos of other people who'd crossed him. Bodies found in rivers. Businesses burned with people inside. I never questioned them again. The cross-examination by Patricia's attorney was harsh. You're saying all this to save yourself, aren't you? Throwing your mother under the bus for a reduced sentence. Jake looked directly at Patricia as he answered, I'm telling the truth because it's the only thing I have left to give. Mom raised me to be weak dependent on her manipulation. She used my failures as weapons, my debts as chains. But Grandma Rose loved me anyway. The least I can do is honor her memory with honesty. So you claim your mother manipulated you into committing arson? No, Jake said firmly. I chose to light that fire. Mom manipulated me into believing I deserved what wasn't mine, but I made the choice to destroy instead of build. I'm guilty. The only question is whether I'll be guilty alone or if everyone involved will face justice. Morrison's attorney tried a different approach. Mr. Henderson, isn't it true you're in protective custody because you owe money to dangerous people? I'm in protective custody because your client tried to have me murdered, Jake shot back. The people I owed money to Morrison bought those debts specifically to control me. Every bad choice I made, he was there to make it worse to tighten the noose. As Jake's testimony wound down, Walsh asked one final question. Mr. Henderson, what would you say to your grandmother if she were here today? Jake broke down completely. Through his tears, he choked out, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You gave me every chance to be better, and I failed you. I burned down your dream because I was too weak to stand up to Mom, and too greedy to see what really mattered. I don't ask for forgiveness, I don't deserve it. I just hope someday something good can come from the ashes of what I destroyed. When Jake was led away, the courtroom was silent. Even hardened reporters seemed moved by the raw honesty of his confession. Patricia, however, was whispering furiously to her attorney, her face a mask of rage at her son's betrayal. That evening, I met with Jake in a secure room at the federal building. It was the first time we'd spoken directly since the fire. He looked up as I entered, hope and fear warring in his eyes. Krista, Don't, I said, sitting across from him. I'm not here to forgive you. I'm not sure I can. You destroyed something beautiful out of greed and cowardice. His shoulders slumped. I know. But, I continued, you've finally done something Grandma would recognize. You've told the truth. That matters. Does it? Jake asked bitterly. The building's still gone. The dream's still burned. The building's being rebuilt, I told him. Bigger and better than before. Your testimony will put away people who've hurt dozens of families. You can't undo what you did, but you might have prevented future victims. Jake looked at me with wonder. You're really rebuilding after everything. Of course. Did you really think a little fire could stop Grandma Rose's dream? She survived the Depression, 2 wars, and raising Patricia. A bit of arson is nothing compared to that. For the first time in years, I saw my brother Babda genuinely smile. She was tough, wasn't she? The toughest. And she loved you, Jake. Even knowing what you were capable of, she loved you. She left you something in her will, not pony, but a chance at redemption. Your testimony today, that was you finally taking it. Jake wiped his eyes. What happens now? Now you face the consequences. You'll go to prison probably for a long time, but maybe there you'll finally become the man Grandma always believed you could be. Someone who builds instead of burns. And you, he asked, what will you do? What I've always done. Build, fight, stand up to bullies and corruption. Make sure Grandma's dream outlives all of us. As I stood to leave, Jake called out, Krista, that Judge Morrison mentioned, be careful. This isn't over. These people have tentacles everywhere. I nodded. I know, but so do we now. Every person your testimony saves becomes another soldier in this fight. Morrison and Patricia lit a fire they can't control. Walking out of the federal building, I thought about family redemption and the prices we pay for our choices. Jake would spend years in prison, but for the first time in his life, he'd acted with courage. Patricia would rage against the bars of her cell, never understanding that her greed had cost her everything. And somewhere Grandma Rose was watching, probably shaking her head at the mess her children had made, but proud that truth had finally won. The trial would continue, more arrests would follow, and justice would slowly grind forward. But tonight, I had work to do. The new community center's foundation was being poured tomorrow, and I planned to be there for every moment. Patricia and Morrison had tried to burn down hope. Instead, they'd only cleared the ground for something stronger to grow. The news broke at 6 in the morning, sending shockwaves through every corner of our city. Judge Peter Clarence. 3 city councilmen, 2 police captains, and 8 other officials had been arrested in coordinated raids. The corruption web that Patricia and Morrison had helped weave was finally unraveling, and the city watched in stunned disbelief. I stood at the construction site of the new community center, watching the foundation being poured while news vans lined the street. Monica handed me her phone, showing the latest breaking news alert. Federal investigation reveals decades of corruption in city government. "This is bigger than we imagined," she said, her voice filled with awe. The morning sunburn cast long shadows across the construction site as Jennifer Walsh arrived looking exhausted but triumphant. She'd been up all night coordinating arrests. "Krista, we need you back in court," she said. "There's someone who wants to testify, and she'll only talk to you first." An hour later, I sat in a witness waiting room facing a woman I'd never expected to see again, Sophia Patterson, Patricia's abandoned daughter. She was 35 now, with tired eyes and Patricia's bone structure, but none of her coldness. "I heard about the trial on the news," Sophia said, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "When they said Patricia Henderson, I couldn't believe it. My mother, the one who left me at my grandmother's house 20 years ago and never came back." "Patricia never mentioned you," I said gently. Sophia laughed bitterly. "Of course not. I was inconvenient. My father died, left us nothing, and suddenly Patricia had a 5-year-old who didn't fit her lifestyle. She told my grandmother she'd be back in a week. That was the last time I saw her." "Why come forward now?" "Because I've been following this trial. Because I have information that might help. And because—" She pulled out a worn photograph of a young Patricia holding baby Sophia. "Because despite everything, I need to face her. I need her to see what she threw away." In court that afternoon, Sophia's testimony was devastating. She revealed that Patricia had tried to contact her 5 years ago not out of maternal love, but because Sophia's adoptive parents had died wealthy. She showed up at the funeral. Sophia testified, her voice steady. "Hadn't seen me in 15 years, but she knew exactly how much I'd inherited. Said she was my mother and deserved half. When I refused, she tried to have me declared incompetent, claiming the grief had affected my judgment." The parallels to my story sent murmurs through the courtroom. Jennifer Walsh presented evidence documents showing Patricia had used the same psychiatrist, Dr. Morton, the same tactics, the same forged evidence. "What happened?" Walsh asked. "My husband is a federal agent," Sophia said with grim satisfaction. "He investigated and found the pattern of fraud, but Patricia disappeared before we could prosecute. Now I know why she'd moved on to her next target, her own mother." Patricia watched from the defense table, her face a mask of fury. When Sophia looked directly at her, searching for any sign of recognition or remorse, Patricia turned away. But the day's surprises weren't over. As Sophia left the stand, a court officer whispered urgently to the judge. After a brief conference, the judge announced, "The jury has reached a verdict. We'll hear it after a brief recess." The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Verdicts on 23 defendants, hundreds of charges. This would take hours. I sat between Monica and Sarah Chen, my heart pounding. When court reconvened, the jury foreman stood with a thick stack of papers. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Morrison, guilty on all counts." The word guilty echoed through the courtroom like a prayer answered. One by one, verdicts were read. Morrison, guilty of arson, racketeering, bribery, conspiracy, 45 years to life. Patricia, guilty on all 27 counts, 35 years without parole. Jake, guilty but with consideration for cooperation, 12 years with possibility of parole in 8. As each verdict was read, Morrison's empire publicly crumbled. His wife filed for divorce before the session ended. His company's stock plummeted. Former victims began filing civil suits that would bankrupt his estate. Patricia's reaction was volcanic. As her verdict was read, she lunged to her feet. "This is a mockery. That money was mine. The center was my idea. You're all being manipulated by her." She pointed at me, spittle flying. She's the criminal. She stole my birthright. Remove the defendant, the judge ordered as bailiffs moved in. As they dragged her away, Patricia's eyes met mine one last time. You'll regret this, Krista. You'll pay for. The doors slammed shut, cutting off her threats. The woman who'd given birth to me but never mothered me was gone, heading for a cell where her manipulations would fall on deaf ears. But the day held one more revelation. After the verdicts, the judge addressed the courtroom. This trial has exposed a cancer in our city's government. Based on evidence presented here, I'm appointing a special master to oversee reforms. Every construction contract, every inspection, every permit from the last decade will be reviewed. As we filed out, Jennifer Walsh pulled me aside. There's something else. Remember those other properties on Morrison's target list? We've contacted all of them. They want to form a coalition, the Rose Henderson Alliance for Community Development. They want you to lead it. I stood stunned as she explained. 15 nonprofit organizations, all potential victims of Morrison's planned arsons, wanted to band together for protection and mutual support. They'd chosen Grandma Rose's name as their banner and me as their spokesperson. That evening, I stood before a packed press conference at the new community center site. Behind me, construction workers continued their tasks, the sound of building replacing the memory of burning. Today, justice was served, I began. But this isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about what we build from the ruins of corruption. The Rose Henderson Alliance will ensure that no developer can again destroy dreams for profit. No official can sell their influence. No family will watch their hopes burn because someone else felt entitled to more. Questions flew from reporters. I answered them all, laying out plans for the alliance, the rebuilt center, and the systematic reforms our city desperately needed. But one question stopped me cold. Ms. Henderson, your mother screamed that you'd pay for this. Are you concerned about retaliation? I thought about all the threats, the violence, the attempts to destroy not just property, but hope itself. Then I looked at the construction site where Monica stood with the architects reviewing plans, where former victims of Morrison's crimes had gathered to watch their tormentors' judgment, where Sophia Patterson was talking to other abandoned children of Patricia's schemes. My grandmother taught me that bullies threaten when they're losing, I said. Patricia has lost everything, her freedom, her schemes, her delusions. Her threats are as empty as her heart. But our promises aren't. This center will be built, this alliance will protect others, and this city will heal from the corruption that plagued it. As the press conference ended, I noticed Judge Clarence being led past in shackles, part of the ongoing arrests. He'd taken Morrison's bribes for 15 years, fixed trials, destroyed lives for money. Now, he'd face the justice he'd denied others. James Morrison approached as the crowd dispersed. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me help, for showing me it's possible to stand up to evil even when it's your own family." "What will you do now?" I asked. "Rebuild," he said with a sad smile. "Not building's trust. I'm liquidating my father's company using the assets to compensate his victims. Then maybe I'll learn what it means to build something honestly." That night, I stood alone at Grandma Rose's grave, the verdicts fresh in my mind. "We did it," I whispered to the headstone. "They're all going to prison. The corruption is exposed. Your dream will live." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice. "I knew you would, dear one. You were always ways stronger than you knew." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Appeals to fight in the center, to complete an alliance to organize. Patricia would scheme from prison, Morrison would try to maintain control, and their network would struggle to survive. But tonight, justice had won. The city that had been shocked by the depth of corruption was already beginning to heal. And from the ashes of everything they'd burned, we were building something they could never destroy, a community united against greed, standing together for hope. The war was over. The rebuilding had begun. 8 months after the verdicts, the new Rose Henderson Center for Hope and Justice stood gleaming in the morning sun. 3 stories of glass and steel arose from the ashes of the old building, stronger and more beautiful than even Grandma Rose had envisioned. Today was dedication day, but the journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. The insurance settlements from both policies had provided ample funding, but money couldn't buy back lost time or erase painful memories. Every day of construction had been a battle against the past and a declaration of faith in the future. I stood in the main atrium watching volunteers arrange chairs for the ceremony. Monica directed the setup with military precision, while Sarah Chen reviewed legal documents ensuring our protections were ironclad. We'd learned our lessons about security cameras, irritable, covered every angle, guards patrolled regularly, and every visitor was documented. Ms. Henderson. A familiar voice made me turn. Jake stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 correctional officers. He wore a suit that hung loose on his diminished frame, his prison-issued ankle monitor visible above his dress shoes. "They approved my request to attend," I asked, genuinely surprised. 8 hours supervised release, one of the officers explained. Judge said his testimony earned him this chance. Jake's eyes swept the building, taking in the children's library, the computer lab visible through glass walls, the art therapy rooms painted in bright, hopeful colors. "It's more beautiful than the original plans," he said softly. "We had to rebuild anyway," I replied. "Seemed foolish not to improve on the design." He moved slowly through the space, his guards maintaining a respectful distance. In the memorial garden, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, a bronze statue of Grandma Rose stood surrounded by flowering plants. Jake pressed his palm against the glass. "I know I don't deserve to be here," he said, "but I needed to see it, needed to know something good came from all that destruction." "Jake," I started, but he shook his head. "I've been going to therapy in prison. Real therapy, not the manipulation tactics Mom taught us. Dr. Williams says I have to stop running from what I did and start building something better, even if it's just inside myself." Before I could respond, a commotion outside drew our attention. Television crews were setting up as dignitaries began arriving. The mayor, the governor, representatives from every organization in the Rose Henderson Alliance, all coming to celebrate not just a building, but a victory over corruption. Among the arrivals was Sophia Patterson, now a board member of the center. She'd thrown herself into the project after the trial, channeling decades of abandonment into creating programs for at-risk youth. She approached Jake and me with determined steps. "Jake," she said simply, "I'm Sophia, your half-sister." Jake's face went white. "Patricia's the daughter she abandoned." "Yes." Sophia's voice was steady. "I wanted to meet you, to understand how we came from the same woman, but chose such different paths." "I chose wrong," Jake said immediately. "Every time I chose wrong, until you didn't," Sophia countered. "Your testimony saved dozens of families from what happened to us. That matters." As they talked, I moved through the building, checking last details. The computer lab had state-of-the-art equipment donated by tech companies moved by our story. The therapy rooms were staffed by volunteers who'd followed the trial and wanted to help. The library already held thousands of books, with Grandma Rose's collection given a place of honor. In the administrative wing, I found Harold Whitman, placing a plaque beside the main office door. "Rose Marie Henderson, 1936-2025, building dreams one child at a time." "She would have loved this," Harold said, his eyes misty. "She made it possible," I replied. Even knowing what Patricia would do, she set everything in motion to ensure it would happen. "Your grandmother was the wisest woman I ever knew," Harold said. "She saw people clearly, their flaws and their potential. She knew Patricia was lost to greed, but she never stopped believing others could choose differently." The dedication ceremony began at noon. The main hall filled with hundreds of people, construction workers who'd volunteered overtime, families who would use the center's services, survivors of Morrison's other arsons, and journalists documenting this triumph over corruption. I stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. In the front row sat the board of directors, including James Morrison, who'd liquidated his father's empire to fund restitution. Behind them were FBI agents who'd become invested in our success, prosecutors who'd fought for justice, and Judge Eleanor Whitfield, who'd seen through the lies. 15 months ago, I began. This ground held only ashes. My family, driven by greed, had burned down my grandmother's dream. They thought destruction was power. They believed that if they couldn't steal what wasn't theirs, no one should have it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many knew the story, but hearing it here in this transformed space gave it new power. They were wrong. What they burned was just wood and nails. The dream, my grandmother's vision of a place where every child could find hope, where families could build better futures, where community meant more than personal gain, that dream was fireproof. Applause interrupted me. I waited for it to die down, seeing Jake in the back row, tears streaming down his face. This center stands not in spite of what happened, but because of it. Every investigation sparked by the arson exposed more corruption. Every trial revealed more victims who needed help. Every conviction strengthened our determination to build something incorruptible. I introduced the programs: free after-school tutoring, job training for parents, counseling for families affected by crime, legal aid for those facing exploitation. Each service a direct response to the failures that had allowed Patricia and Morrison to prey on others for so long. But most importantly, I continued. This center bears a new name, not just Rose Henderson Center, but Rose Henderson Center for Hope and Justice. Because my grandmother knew you couldn't have one without the other. Hope without justice is wishful thinking. Justice without hope is mere vengeance. Together, they create the foundation for real change. As I spoke, I noticed movement in the crowd. Parents were pointing to the windows, children tugging at sleeves. Outside, something extraordinary was happening. Hundreds of butterflies released by the gardening club filled the memorial garden. They danced around Grandma Rose's statue, their wings catching the light like living stained glass. It hadn't been planned, the club had kept it secret, but the symbolism was perfect. Beauty rising from destruction. Transformation after trial by fire. My grandmother left me more than money, I concluded. She left me the knowledge that love isn't passive. It plans, prepares, and protects. It sees clearly and acts wisely. It builds foundations strong enough to support not just our dreams, but our children's dreams too. The ribbon cutting was scheduled for after the speeches, but 7-year-old Marcus Washington had other ideas. The boy whose family had lost their home to one of Morrison's earlier arsons broke free from his mother and ran to the entrance. "Can we go in now?" he asked, bouncing with excitement. "I want to see the books." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I abandoned protocol, handing him the giant scissors. "Would you like to help me?" Together, we cut the ribbon. The crowd surged forward, eager to explore. Within minutes, children filled the library, teenagers clustered around computers, and parents examined job training brochures. The center came alive with exactly the energy Grandma Rose had envisioned. I found Jake in the memorial garden standing before Grandma's statue. The bronze captured her perfectly, wise eyes, gentle smile, hands extended in welcome. "I'm going to earn this second chance," he said quietly. "In prison, I'm teaching literacy classes, helping other inmates get their GEDs. It's small, but it's building instead of burning." "Grandma would be proud," I said, meaning it. "Maybe someday," Jake replied. "When I get out, if you'll let me, I want to volunteer here. Show kids what happens when you choose greed over family. Maybe stop one of them from becoming me." His guards signaled it was time to leave. As they led him away, Jake turned back once more, taking in the center filled with life and laughter. "Thank you," he mouthed before disappearing into the transport van. The celebration continued into the evening. The kitchen served meals prepared by culinary students from the job training program. Children performed songs in the auditorium. Parents signed up for services, their hope tangible in the way they clutched brochures and program schedules. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, I stood in the garden with Monica, Sarah, and Sophia. We'd become an unlikely family bonded by trial and triumph. Think Patricia knows about today? Sophia asked. Probably, I said. Prison communications are limited but not eliminated. Someone will have told her. Good, Sophia said firmly. Let her sit in her cell knowing that everything she tried to destroy has been rebuilt stronger. Let her understand that her legacy isn't theft or manipulation. It's the alliance of people united against predators like her. An elderly woman approached using a walker, but moving with determination. I recognized her from the trial, Mrs. Chen, one of Patricia's victims from years ago. My dear, she said, grasping my hand, I've waited so long to see justice. Your mother stole my husband's pension, convinced us to sign papers we didn't understand. We lost everything. But today, seeing this knowing she's in prison while you build dreams, it heals something I thought would hurt forever. As the evening wound down, I walked through the center one more time. In the computer lab, teenagers learned coding. In the library, a grandmother read to a circle of entranced toddlers. In the therapy rooms, counselors met with families affected by Morrison's crimes, helping them process trauma and plan futures. This was Grandma Rose's true revenge, not punishment, but transformation. Every child educated here was a rebuke to Patricia's greed. Every family helped was proof that love builds while hatred burns. Every program offered was evidence that some inheritances can't be stolen, only shared. Standing in the atrium as the last visitors reluctantly left, I pulled out my phone to check messages. Among the congratulations and well wishes was one that made me pause a text from an unknown number. Beautiful ceremony. Your grandmother would be proud. Some of us inside are proud too. Maybe redemption isn't just a word after all, a friend of Jake's. I smiled, imagining Jake teaching fellow inmates to read Planting Seeds of Transformation in the unlikely soil of a prison classroom. Even there, Grandma Rose's legacy grew. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Running a community center meant constant fundraising, careful management, and vigilance against those who would exploit or corrupt our mission. The appeals process for Patricia and Morrison would drag on for years, their lawyers seeking any technicality to reduce their sentences. But tonight, the center stood complete, filled with the ghosts of happy children yet to come. In the garden, butterflies settled for the evening on Grandma Rose's bronze shoulders as if she'd called them home. We'd built more than a building. We'd built proof that good people united could overcome evil, that dreams defended were dreams achieved, and that the best revenge against those who burn is to build something they could never destroy. A community of people who choose hope and justice over greed and destruction. The war was over. The healing had begun. And somewhere I knew Grandma Rose was smiling, watching her dream shelter its first of many generations to come. 1 year to the day after the fire, the Rose Henderson Center for Hope and Justice hosted its official grand opening. What had begun as ashes and heartbreak had transformed into a beacon of renewal that drew thousands from across the state. The morning air buzzed with excitement as vendors set up booths, performers tested sound equipment, and volunteers directed traffic into overflow parking lots we'd never imagined needing. I stood on the rooftop garden, a new addition made possible by an anonymous donation. We later discovered came from 12 of Morrison's former victims pooling resources. The view stretched across our transformed neighborhood where abandoned buildings once stood, new businesses had opened. Where empty lots had collected trash, community gardens bloomed. The center had become a catalyst for renewal that spread far beyond its walls. 5,000 confirmed attendees and counting. Monica reported joining me with her ever-present tablet. The fire chief who investigated the arson wants to speak, says he has an announcement. Below us, the memorial garden was already packed. Families posed for photos beside Grandma Rose's statue, now surrounded by rose bushes in full-bloom varieties named Hope, Justice, and Redemption, specially cultivated by the horticultural program we'd started for at-risk youth. The opening ceremony was scheduled for noon, but the real celebration had begun at dawn when former homeless individuals who'd found shelter in our transitional housing program prepared breakfast for early arrivals. Their leader, Marcus Thompson, had lived on the streets for 5 years before our job training program helped him become a certified chef. Today, he directed a kitchen staff of 15 all graduates of similar programs. Ms. Henderson, a young reporter, approached notebook in hand. "I'm writing a book about the trial and its aftermath. Could you comment on the recent news about your mother?" I'd been expecting this question. 3 days ago, Patricia had filed another appeal, this time claiming ineffective counsel. Her latest lawyer argued that her original defense team had failed to properly present her grief-induced temporary insanity defense. The courts had already signaled their likely rejection, but Patricia persisted from her cell, burning through what remained of her hidden assets on futile legal challenges. "My mother made her choices," I said carefully. "The justice system made its judgment. Today isn't about looking backward at those who chose destruction. It's about celebrating those who choose to build." As the reporter left, I noticed a familiar figure in the crowd below: Sophia Patterson, leading a group of teenagers on a tour. She'd become our youth program director, channeling her abandonment into ensuring no child felt forgotten. Beside her walked James Morrison, now our chief financial officer, having proven his commitment to transparency by implementing the strictest oversight measures any nonprofit had ever adopted. The morning passed in a blur of activities. Children painted murals on temporary walls we'd set up. Local businesses demonstrated trades in our vocational wing. The computer lab hosted its first hackathon with tech companies offering internships to winners. Every corner of the center pulsed with purposeful energy. At 11:30, an unexpected visitor arrived. Harold Whitman, now 83 and officially retired, entered with a small wooden box. "I've been saving this for today," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside lay a pair of scissors, antique, engraved with roses. These belonged to Rose's mother. She used them for every ribbon cutting at her own community work during the Depression. Rose kept them, hoping to use them for this center. "I think she'd want you to have them." I accepted the scissors, reverently feeling the weight of generations of service in their worn handles. Another piece of Grandma Rose preserved and passed forward. The ceremony began precisely at noon. The main hall overflowed with speakers set up outside for the crowds that couldn't fit inside. As I approached the podium, I saw him, Jake, in the back row of the overflow area. Not in person, he still had 3 years left on his sentence, but on a tablet held by his literacy student, Martin Rodriguez. "Jake's whole class is watching from the prison library," Martin explained to those nearby. "He wanted to see what hope looks like built." I began my speech by reading from Grandma Rose's original proposal for the center, written 15 years ago. "Every child deserves a place where their dreams matter more than their circumstances. Every family needs support to break cycles of poverty and pain. Every community requires space where hope isn't naive optimism, but practical action backed by resources and love." Today, I continued looking out at the sea of faces. We open not just a building, but a promise. A promise that greed won't defeat generosity, that those who burn will be outnumbered by those who build, that every Patricia and Morrison who preys on others will face a united community that refuses to be victims. The crowd erupted in applause. I waited for quiet, then introduced our keynote speaker, 7-year-old Marcus Washington, the boy who'd cut our ribbon at the dedication. He'd prepared a poem about butterflies and buildings, which he delivered with the fearless confidence only children possess. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Fire Chief Robert Coleman, no relation to the corrupt inspector, took the stage next. "A year ago, I stood in the ashes of arson, documenting one of the worst crimes I'd investigated. Today, I stand here to announce that thanks to the Rose Henderson Alliance's advocacy, our city has implemented the strictest anti-arson measures in the nation. Building inspections have been reformed. Corrupt officials have been purged. What happened here sparked changes that will protect communities for generations. The ceremony continued with performances, testimonials, and surprises. The biggest came when the state attorney general announced the creation of the Rose Henderson Act legislation, making the destruction of community service buildings a special class of hate crime with mandatory minimum sentences. Those who attack places of hope attack society itself, the attorney general declared. This law ensures that future Morrisons and Patricias will face consequences that match their crimes against community. As the formal program concluded, people dispersed throughout the center to explore. Every room told a story of transformation. The computer lab, where former gang members now learned coding. The kitchen, where recovering addicts discovered culinary arts. The therapy rooms, where Morrison's victims processed trauma and planned futures. I found myself in the childcare center, where toddlers played under the supervision of trained staff. On the wall hung photos of every child who'd already benefited from our programs, hundreds of small faces representing thousands of hours of care, education, and hope. Aunt Krista, a small voice made me turn. Marcus Washington tugged at my sleeve, clutching a picture he'd drawn. I made this for Miss Rose. The drawing showed a building with flames at the bottom, but butterflies emerging from the top. In a child's simple art was the entire story: destruction transformed into beauty, pain into purpose. As evening approached, the crowds gradually thinned, but the energy remained. In the auditorium, Jake's prison literacy class had connected via video for a virtual tour. I watched my brother guide his fellow inmates through the building, pointing out the library where he'd once stolen books to sell for drug money, now filled with donated volumes he'd never have the chance to read there himself. This is what we're working toward, Jake told his students. Not just getting out, but having somewhere worth going, something worth building instead of burning. Sophia found me as the sun set, casting golden light through the western windows. Patricia knows, she said quietly. One of the inmates told me she watched the news coverage, threw her meal tray at the television. Let her rage, I replied. Every tantrum in her cell is proof that we won. She has to live with the knowledge that her greed created its opposite, a place where greed can't survive because generosity overwhelms it. As the last visitors left, the staff and volunteers gathered in the main hall for a private celebration. We'd served over 3,000 meals, given hundreds of tours, signed up dozens of families for services. The center wasn't just open, it was alive, breathing with the purpose Grandma Rose had envisioned. Harold Whitman raised a glass of sparkling cider. We maintained a strict no-alcohol policy. To Rose Henderson, who saw clearly, loved deeply, and built foundations strong enough to support dreams she'd never see completed. To Grandma Rose, we echoed our voices, filling the space that had once held only ashes. Later, as Monica and I conducted the final walkthrough, checking locks and setting alarms, she asked, "What now?" "We've built it, filled it with programs, defeated the villains. What comes next?" I paused in the memorial garden where moonlight turned the butterflies' resting wings to silver. "Now we do the hard part. We maintain it. We grow it. We present it from future Patricias and Morrisons. We prove that this wasn't just about revenge or justice, but about something bigger, which is that love builds better than hate burns, that communities united can't be destroyed by individual greed, that Grandma Rose was right. Hope and justice aren't just words, but daily choices that compound into transformation." As we prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a message from Jake. Watched it all. Cried like a baby. "My students are inspired. 3 signed up for GED classes tonight. I know I can't undo what I burned, but maybe I can help others choose building instead. Tell Grandma Rose's statue I'm trying. Love your brother who's finally learning." I typed back, "She knows, and she's proud. Keep building, Jake, even from inside your building." The Rose Henderson Center for Hope and Justice stood complete, its windows glowing softly in the night. But this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Every day would bring new challenges, new children to serve, new dreams to nurture. Patricia would exhaust her appeals and serve her time. Morrison would die in prison, his empire dust, but the center would endure, growing stronger with each life touched. Each family helped, each dream defended. As I drove away, I made one last stop, Grandma Rose's grave. Fresh flowers covered the plot left by grateful families throughout the day. I knelt beside the headstone, running my fingers over the carved words. She built dreams that couldn't burn. We did it, Grandma, I whispered. Not just the building, we built a community that won't let greed win. Your dream became our dream, and now it belongs to everyone who chooses hope over hatred, justice over jealousy, building over burning. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and somewhere in the distance a child laughed, perhaps leaving the center with a new book, a full belly, or just the knowledge that someone cared. That sound, more than any verdict or ceremony, was Grandma Rose's true monument. The story that began with ashes had become one of renewal. A family's greed had sparked a community's generosity. An attempt to destroy had only cleared ground for something indestructible, not because buildings can't burn, but because dreams, when shared widely enough, become fireproof. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, next month, new programs, next year, new expansions. But tonight, the Rose Henderson Center for Hope and Justice stood as proof that love, strategically applied and fiercely defended, always wins in the end. Grandma Rose had known the secret all along. The best inheritance isn't money or property, but the wisdom to build what greed can only envy and never possess, a legacy of lives transformed, communities strengthened, and dreams that rise from ashes stronger than before. Thank you, Grandma, I said one last time, for everything. And in the wind through the roses on her grave, I could have sworn I heard her reply, "No, dear one, thank you, now keep building." So we would, day after day, child by child, dream by carefully defended dream. Because that's what you do when someone tries to burn down hope. You build it back stronger, taller, and too beautiful to ever destroy again. The war was won, the building was complete. But the real victory was in every light still burning in the center's windows, each one a small flame of hope that no amount of greed could ever extinguish. If you've experienced family betrayal or greed destroying relationships, you're not alone. What would you do if your family chose money over love? How do we build communities strong enough to withstand corruption and greed? Share your thoughts below, and if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to know that hope can rise from any ashes. Thank you for joining Krista's journey, and remember, when we stand together, we build dreams that cannot burn.